Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live, or if you are listening back to this later, perhaps welcome to In Deep Sleep. As a sort of probably the last time I sort of throw this out there, in case you've not picked up on this, I have a new channel, In Deep Sleep, where I take the audio from this and I put it to some soothing images, a log fire, that kind of thing, with a little bit of background noise, with the intention of this being something that you can listen to as you drift off to sleep. So if you are doing that, welcome, and I hope you sleep well. There should be a link to that somewhere down in the description or something like that. But today we are looking at Ashara Dayne in the latest in a series of uh, live streams going through mysteries in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. And this time it's a person. It's not just like oh, what happened there. The entire character of Ashara Dayne is quite a mystery. And she has captured the imagination of a lot of the A Song of Ice and Fire community, despite the fact that she's actually only mentioned by name 6 times in the entire story of A Song of Ice and Fire. We don't meet her. She's not around during the story, so we don't know what she's like. And although, and we'll get onto this in just a moment, although there are various stories about her, things that people say, we don't really get to know a huge amount about her as a character. What we do know are a few little bits of history. She is from House Dayne, which is one of the oldest and most unique houses in Dawn. And she was a handmaiden to Elia Martell, who was married to Prince Rhaegar. Her brother, Arthur Dayne, Sir Arthur Dayne, legendary knight, Sword of the Morning, keeper of the great sword Dawn. He was best friends with Rhaegar, so that was quite a close-knit little group. We also know that she was, and we hear this from a few different people, she was beautiful. She had dark hair, she had purple eyes. To get the purple eyes thing out of the way, George R. R. Martin has confirmed that, yes, House Dayne often have purple eyes. That's part of the colouring of House Dayne. This does not mean that they're secret Targaryens. He's been very clear about this. He's saying, or secret Valyrians. He says sometimes different ethnicities share the same characteristics, and that's what's going on here. So they seem to be, and we'll talk about House Dayne more broadly another time, perhaps. But they seem to be from. Have arrived a very long time ago, completely different from the arrival of the Andals or the Rhoynish or the First Men, a different group who arrived. They specifically followed this falling star, which landed on this island on the south of Westeros, which they then named Starfall. And from that falling star, from that meteorite, they forged their great sword, Dawn. So that is why they are different. That's why they're special. And this sword is ancient, thousands of years old. And the holders of this sword are often some of the most legendary fighters in all of Westeros. So she was handmaiden to Elia Martell. The first we really hear about her is that she was there at the tourney at Harrenhal. Now, the tourney at Harrenhal, you will remember, was this tournament which happened in what later became known as the Year of the Fourth Spring. There'd been winter for some time, then spring arrived. Everybody believed this was spring, and there was this tourney at Harrenhal where a lot of things happened. And she was there. She was right at the heart of it. Elia Martell was there. We hear one account about the fact that at the great feast, she danced with a lot of different people. She caught the eye of a number of different people that we're aware of. And then she kind of like disappears from the narrative. We get these rumors that there was a dalliance or a love affair with Ned Stark. And we're told that she had a child, and that then she decided to end her own life, threw herself off of the tallest tower in Starfall at the end of Robert's Rebellion. And that's it. That's the story that we're told. Now, why is she a mystery then? What is it that, and why is she such an intriguing figure? I think it's because we're supposed to be suspicious um, of the way George R. R. Martin is writing it. Everything that we read and hear about her just doesn't quite hang right. It's as if there's something else going on. Um, we're told Ned is such an honourable person, and yet we're told that he had a child with her and then abandoned her and she committed suicide. Is that an honourable thing for him to be doing? Doesn't really hang right. Is he really that ashamed of her that he doesn't ever let anyone name, if she is the mother of Jon Snow, why wouldn't he let anyone name her? Why is that such a shame? Actually, him and her being together, this is before Cat was on the scene because he wasn't supposed to marry Cat. It would have been a sensible match. He's the second son of Lord Stark, and she's the eldest daughter of the Danes, which is sort of a second-tier house and Dawn. It would have been, there's nothing mysterious or shameful about that at all. So we're supposed to immediately be a little bit suspicious, and then our suspicions are supposed to be added to, I think, every time she gets mentioned. The first time really she's mentioned is Cat. Now, Cat remembers when, and from her perspective, you can understand why she might have thought that might have had strong feelings about this. She has just married Ned. She hadn't expected to, but she had fallen pregnant straight away with him within the first 2 weeks after their marriage. She has the child. She heads up to Winterfell to start her new life, to this desolate northern wasteland that she doesn't know anything about the people or the culture. And as she arrives, she finds that what she's been told is Ned's bastard child, who is there and already ensconced in Winterfell. And the word is that this child is going to be brought up and raised as part of the family. You can understand why she was a bit put out by this. She has heard rumours that this was Ashara Dayne's child, and so she puts it to Ned, her new husband. She asks him about Ashara Dayne, and he reacts incredibly strongly. She'd never seen him this angry before. He says, "Where did you hear that name from? Never say that again." He heads down, tries to find out where this rumor has come from, and that name was never heard in Winterfell again. This is not like Ned. His reaction is a really strong one, and to the extent that we're supposed to go, okay, so if that is Jon's mother, why is he that touchy about it? There's nothing wrong with this in many ways. If he'd had this child, as even Cat accepts, many lords have bastard children, and that's just something that you accept. You might not like it, but you have to accept it. So why was Ned reacting that strongly? We're supposed to immediately be a little bit suspicious. Then, much later, we have Ned Dayne, this character who's young. He's the new Lord of Starfall, the new Dayne Lord. And he, for a variety of reasons, runs into Arya. And he has this really intriguing conversation with her. First of all, he's saying, "Yeah, I'm named after your father." He's he's held in such high regard in our family, and you're immediately there thinking, "Well, hang on, how does that work?" I thought what we've got here is Ned is ashamed of her. He's abandoned her. She was heartbroken because of what happened. She threw herself off of this tower. and now you're naming your heir after Ned. That doesn't hold together. We're supposed to be a bit suspicious. And then he comes out with this story and says, yes, Ned and her, they were in love. But then also he seems to have the story that seems to be told there in Starfall is that Jon Snow is Ned's bastard child with Willa, this serving woman. So they think that he was in love with Ashara Dayne, but then slept with one of her serving women. Again, it doesn't quite add up. We're supposed to be suspicious about this. There's something that the reactions, the how people are talking about it doesn't seem to work. Then we get this the story. It's not just a story about Ashara Dayne. It's a story about the Night of the Laughing Tree. It's a story about the turning at Harrenhal. But we do get to hear a bit about Ashara Dayne. And we'll get on to that whole story when Jojen and Meera tell this to Bran. And they stop several times and say, are you sure your father's not told you this story? They're absolutely confused. Why wouldn't Ned have told his children this story? Why wouldn't he have told them about Ashara Dayne? So again, we're supposed to be suspicious. What's going on there? And then we get Barristan Selmy, who was at the tourney at Harrenhal, and he thinks back to this time, and it turns out that he fell in love with her from afar. He couldn't do anything about it. He was Knight of the Kingsguard. There was nothing he could do, but he remembers that she was dishonoured by a man. Barristan Selmy's morals are such that the clear implication is that she slept with somebody at the tourney at Harrenhal, and then she turned to Stark. The implication here, we don't know, but the implication is that this is probably Ned Stark. It certainly doesn't seem that Ned Stark was the one who dishonoured her, because Barristan Selmy seems to hold Ned Stark in very high regard. So again, this idea that Ned slept with her doesn't quite work out. So we're supposed to be suspicious, and that is the reason, I think, why she has fascinated so many of us for so long, because we're not given the answers, and yet very clearly we're told that again and again there's something going on here underneath the surface. If you start digging, then maybe you'll figure it out. I've got my thoughts on what was going on there, which I will set out in just one moment. But let's have a quick flick through the chat first. Maura Lee, hi there, Maura, great to see you. Saying just a show of love and support. So glad to be able to join the live stream at last and to chat. Love all the fabulous content, merch, and stories. Thank you, Robert. Well, fantastic, and it's wonderful to have you here. And I'm so glad that you can hang around. Do please, get involved in the chat. I hugely appreciate your support, Maura. Thank you so much. And also Morally saying for the mods, and yes, let's do a little bit of early mod love. If you're here, if you're watching this live, please do get involved in the chat. Let me know what you think. Drop some questions in. I will pick up as many questions as I can going through. Can't promise to pick up everything, I'm afraid, because the chat does move through quite quickly. But the moderators are the people who keep the chat going, make sure that we don't get invaded by spam bots and the like, and just keep it this positive community. So it should be somewhere where you are able to share your thoughts and your love about the books, the stories that we all enjoy. So if you are here, could you just show a little bit of love to the moderators? Look, people are asking about what's with the XP. I do not know, is the honest answer. I will have a look. I'm not aware of it. There's something that YouTube are doing with XP. Oh, pass. That's not something I'm aware of. Maybe they sent me an email or something that I didn't read. I don't know. James Boris saying Sir Pounce is secretly Ashara Dayne. Yeah. Thank you. One thing that a lot of people have concluded from all of this is that Ashara Dayne is not dead. What happened was faked. We don't have eyewitness reports. We just have a story of this is what happened. We don't have a body, etc., etc. And so a lot of people have come to the conclusion that Ashara Dayne is hiding somewhere, changed her identity, and this does kind of, even if you ignore everything else that was going on, or might potentially be going on, it does kind of make sense that she might want to do that. Because the whole rebellion was started. Yes, there was the Mad King Aerys was doing Mad King things, but Robert Baratheon was livid with Rhaegar. He hated him because of what he thought he did to Lyanna, the woman that he was supposed to be marrying. To the extent that when Rhaegar's children, very small children, are killed by the Lannisters, he's actually all right with that. He's quite fine with that. And the very clear implication, he is going to hunt down absolutely everybody who was there connected with Rhaegar. Now, when you start to think about it, that's what I mentioned a bit earlier. There was actually quite a close-knit group there. All of them are actually either dead or disappeared. Rhaegar, obviously, Elia and her children. But also then you get Arthur Dayne died. John Connington was exiled and was believed to have died. We get Miles Mouton died. We get Richard Lonmouth disappeared. There's a great theory about where he is in the story, but he's disappeared. So all of these people who were close to Rhaegar have been killed or have disappeared. And so because Robert Baratheon would almost certainly hunt them down if he thought they were in some way complicit with what happened. So there is a motivation there for Ashara Dayne to fake her own death. Christy Monith, thank you very much for the super chat. I didn't see a question attached to that one. If there was one, just drop it into the chat. I'm sure one of the moderators will bring it to my attention. So Tony Sled saying 0 Ashara Dayne dialogue. We know nothing yet. I mean, this is the point I'm trying to make, is that she captures our imagination, but we don't hear her speak. We don't. Other than a few sort of stories about what happened to her, we don't know about anything from her perspective, what she believed, we don't get, there's no visions of her going back into the past that we see her like we do with some characters. So yeah, nothing. And I think I had one. So Tony Sled saying, Kat was insecure about a dead Ashara. Meanwhile, we have no proof Ned held her betrothal to Brandon over her. Similarly, love security versus love insecurity. Yes, I mean, I absolutely get that. So the point here is that Kat was insecure about the fact that Ned might have loved somebody else beforehand. Ned, however, didn't ever, as far as we're aware, hold it over Kat that, she was supposed to be with his brother, which would have been a little bit awkward, it has to be said. So yeah, Ned is a good guy. Callie Summers, might there be some historical rhyming with Arthur? Jojen being sacrificed for, and Ashara Meera protecting a Stark child. Yes, potentially. So this is the working theory here. I assume you're saying is so that Arthur Dayne died in protection of a Stark child. Jojen also has Probably we'll get into Jojen Paste. I've got a random question later about Jojen Paste, actually. Potentially has died for another Stark child. This is Bran. And then we get Ashara Dayne, who is also involved in protecting this Stark child, and Meera also involved in protecting Stark child. So yes, there's an echoing there, definitely. Okay, I think that's me caught up in the chat. So, I've got one quote just to sort of wrap up the introduction about her before I get into the questions from my patrons. I've got one quote from George R. R. Martin, which I think gives us the only other bit of context we have. This is from a while ago, so maybe things have changed since then, but I see no reason why it would have done. This was back in the time when he would answer questions from fans about the story, and he didn't want to give away plot important things, but still he would answer. And someone asked him a question about Ashara Dayne, and he said this. He says, "All will be revealed in good time. I will give you this much, however. Ashara Dayne was not nailed to the floor in Starfall, as some of the fans who write to me seem to assume. They have horses in Dawn too, and boats, though not many of their own. As a matter of fact, she was one of Princess Elia's lady companions in King's Landing in the first few years after Elia married Rhaegar." So he's trying to, I think, here hint at the fact that we kind of think of her as being based down in Starfall. That's not necessarily the case, which opens up, during Robert's Rebellion, which opens up a whole range of other possibilities. I'm not saying that I necessarily think this is true, but it's entirely possible that she was with that group who was with Rhaegar, and they went to get Lyanna Stark. Why might she be? Well, she will have been there with Rhaegar and Elia on Dragonstone when the decision was made. We're told that Rhaegar set out with a group of his closest companions, and we're not told exactly who they are, but she would certainly seem to fit that bill. And if he was going there in order to take her away and not kidnap her in some way that she might not wish, then actually Rhaegar seems quite a nice guy. He seems quite sensitive. He will probably be very aware of the fact that Lyanna, as redoubtable a character as she clearly was, probably wouldn't like the idea of just being picked up by this group of guys. Just her having someone that she knows, another woman there, would probably be quite a nice touch. And Rhaegar seems like quite a nice guy. So perhaps one of the things that George R. R. Martin was hinting at there was that she was part of that group. And so that might mean that perhaps she came to the Tower of Joy with them. Perhaps she was there inside. I've talked about it many times before. It's pretty clear that the Tower of Joy was not just Lyanna Stark on her own in the tower with a baby with 3 knights standing outside. There will have been more people involved than that. So Ashara Dayne may well be one of the people who was there and involved. We don't know. If not that, she might have been doing other things, but she wasn't just staying down in Starfall during the war. Okay, let's get to some questions. Lady Pushkin's first, saying, "Can I put forward a new merch idea?" I'm terrible at pushing merch as well. There is somewhere down here. There's merch if you're interested in that. Ideas: In Deep Geek bookmark and an In Deep Sleep mask. I think we have bookmarks for In Deep Geek, but I'm not 100% on that. You would have to click on the links down there. As for In Deep Sleep mask, I like the idea. That's good. I will see what I can do about that. Um, okay, question. Why do you think that Ashara Dayne is with Howland Reed? Sorry, need a refresh about this. Absolutely. So this is my working theory. I did a video on this ages ago. I think it came down with the Robert's Rebellion series. I will put this one back up again. Do not worry. But the working theory goes a little bit like this. First of all, we have, as we've already pointed out, this doesn't add up. The story that we have doesn't seem quite right. So we are looking for another level here, something else going on that we haven't got all the truth of. And my starting point for this, when you can have many starting points, but my starting point for this is the fact that the Danes love Ned Stark. And if you believe that Ashara Dayne and Ned Stark got together or were in love or anything like that, you have to believe something along these lines, which is that Ned and Ashara met at the tourney at Harrenhal. They fell in love to the extent that she met up with him during the war. They slept, maybe they'd been sleeping together before, but they slept together then, and she fell pregnant at about the same time that Ned was getting married, give or take. We know that terms of timing because when baby John was brought up, Ned was very clear, oh, this was after, which means, but a little bit after Rob was born, which means that it helped out in terms of succession, in case anyone was thinking, oh, so he has got a child who's older than Rob. He was very clear. He went, no, this isn't the case. But also, this means that those two babies must have looked roughly the same age. There's not a big, and when small newborn babies and babies up, a year or so, then you can tell when a baby's 1 or whether a baby's 3. They're brought at about this kind of the same kind of age. So about the time that Ned was getting married, give or take a few weeks, maybe after he got married, maybe before he got married, they slept together. She fell pregnant. She gave birth. He, by this point, was married and decides he's going to stick with his marriage and abandon Ashara Dayne. He goes to the Tower of Joy. He kills her brother. Then goes to Starfall, where, according to the Danes, he then slept with her servant, although by implication he must have done that earlier. She broke her heart. She decided to end her own life by throwing herself off the top of the tower. He then took her child, went up to Winterfell, refused to acknowledge that she was the mother, and took the nurse, the woman that allegedly he'd also been sleeping with him. And after all of that, the Danes go, wow, this guy is amazing. We're going to name our firstborn son after him. That, for me, very clearly says no. The Ned thing did not happen. But where did this rumor about Ned and her come from? Well, when you start digging into it, you find this came from the tourney at Harrenhal. When Arya, or after Arya has talked to young Ned Dayne, she's kind of like thrown a bit by this. I thought my father was an honourable man. Why would he do such things? Even she's like thrown by it. You'd expect to be, but there's a guy there who was part of the Stark um, uh, Team Stark for a long time, Stark retinue, who'd been at Harrenhal. And he just kind of downplays it. So what? Doesn't actually matter. Plenty of men in tourneys have this kind of, you know, he wasn't married at the time. It doesn't. It's so what? The line goes. So what if he has a bit of a fumble in a tent? The clear implication is that there were people heard what was going on in a tent. You can't hide much in a tent, and that's where the rumors started. So this rumor amongst the Stark staff carried on all the way up to Winterfell. That's where Cat heard it from, but it all stems from the tent at Harrenhal. Now, if we've decided it probably wasn't Ned, who else might have been there? We're pretty sure it was Ashara Dayne. Somebody presumably saw her going in. Who else was there? Well, we're actually told that Ned shared a tent with Howland Reed, which is interesting. So suddenly we get this idea, oh, well, maybe Howland Reed is in on this. Then you get the story that Jojen and Meera tell Bran, and the one that they can't believe that they've not, that Ned hasn't told his children about. And the way that the story is told is basically, it reads a bit like How I Met Your Mother kind of story. It's about Howland Reed and what Howland Reed was doing at the tourney at Harrenhal. And we get the whole story about the Night of the Laughing Tree, and then we get to hear about the feast. And we read about how his eyes suddenly fell upon this beautiful woman with long, dark hair, purple eyes. She was amazing. And here's the list of people that she danced with that night. It's a really weird story to tell your children, oh, if that wasn't their mother. You'll never guess, kids. Just before I met your mother, I met this amazing woman. She was so beautiful. Let me tell you, I couldn't take my eyes off of her all night. She did this, she did that. She was dancing with this person. She was amazing. And then I met your mother, and it doesn't ring true as a story for me unless Howland and Ashara met. And the way the story is structured is that she is the maiden, he is the lad. Everybody else has got names. They're not named as like, and then Ned did this, and then Rhaegar did that, and whatever. Everybody else has got a name based on their house sigil. So all of the Starks are like the Quiet Wolf, or the Wild Wolf, or the Young Wolf, and the only two characters who aren't labelled like that are the lad and the maiden. The story feels to be about them. So, are either of those things stone cold certainties? Well, no. But I think that's enough to make him the prime candidate for being the person who Sir Barristan thinks dishonoured Ashara Dayne, slept with Ashara Dayne. And it makes sense of what he says happens next, is that she then turned to Stark. Why would she turn to Stark? We're not told exactly which Stark. The implication is that this probably was Ned, but we're not 100% certain, but one of the Starks for help. Why would you turn to the Starks for help? Well, because they're the lords of the North, and this is Howland's lord. She perhaps knew that she'd fallen pregnant. Maybe she'd fallen in love. What's going to happen here? She needs to talk to somebody. Is there any chance that she could marry him? So that ties in. It kind of works. Why she would turn to this person who otherwise it's a bit random. Why she'd pick him, not one of her, one of her own friends. So all of that is this kind of like hints that might be what's going on. Then we get this idea that she does need to disappear at the end. And Ned Stark, how on earth can they have the Daynes have this high opinion of Ned Stark if she ended her own life because of him? Clearly not. Could they have a high opinion of Ned Stark because he actually saved her life and he organized her to be faking her own death and then smuggled her off somewhere where he knew nobody would ever be able to find her, which is in the Neck. Nobody ever goes into the Neck. Married to the woman that she loves. That feels as if the story hangs together. That gives an explanation for why the Daynes might hold him in such high regard, because everybody knew he was best friends with Robert Baratheon. One word from him and Robert Baratheon would surely kill her. But actually, he helped her to escape. That's why they hold him in such high regard. And obviously he returned the sword Dawn. So, are there any hints that she went to the Neck? Well, nobody goes to the Neck, so we've not seen her. But we do know that she has that Meera Reed was born at about the right time for her to be Ashara Dayne's firstborn child, which kind of works. And we do know the name of Howland Reed's wife, which is Gianna, Jyana, I think maybe two N's. We know George R. R. Martin loves little wordplay tricks, particularly with people's names. Gianna, if this is a made-up name, then John and Lyanna, it kind of works. And then we get the sort of the last thing, which again, it's indicative, it's suggestive, but it's supposed to make us suspicious, is when Jojen and Meera arrive to swear fealty after Ned's died. Robb is the new lord in Winterfell. Bran is there on his behalf, and they swear fealty to him, and they do this what sounds like quite an ancient vow. But the way they're introduced is as the Lady Meera and her brother Jojen. And she is very clearly the senior of the two. She's the heir, not Jojen, which is odd because that's not the custom in the North. It is that in the North, the oldest born son would inherit, not necessarily just the oldest born. If you were the oldest born daughter, you would not inherit. There is, however, one place in Westeros where if you're the oldest born, it doesn't matter whether you're a boy or a girl, you will inherit, and that is Dorne. So might she have headed up to the Neck with Howland Reed, assumed the name Gianna, and introduced some of her people's customs there? It's entirely possible. So that's my working theory. Now, for me, this all hangs together. There is no one thing, and because George R. R. Martin has not given us this yet, there is no one thing which is there, which is like the smoking gun that allows us to say definitely this is the case. But it explains so much of the story about what's going on, why House Dayne love Ned Stark, why the Reeds seem to have a different inheritance system, why the rumors seem to start from Ned's tent when it doesn't seem to have been Ned himself who was involved. All of these things, that the pieces just kind of drop into place. We're waiting for confirmation of it, but that's my working hypothesis. So there you go. As I say, I will put that back up in a video at some point. So Tony Sled said, if she's alive, she's mourning or avenging Elia, maybe. Yeah, perhaps. Tony Sled saying, we know from the reads she was at the tourney. She was definitely at the tourney. Agreed. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. Mara Lee saying Ned Stark eventually returned the sword Dawn back to House Dayne after the death of Sir Arthur Dayne. Who do you think will be the next Sword of the Morning and eventually wield Dawn? So we're not told the exact mechanism, but House Dayne, with their sword Dawn, it's not the way that most of these ancestral swords in Westeros seem to work. It's just passed down to the next head of the family and then the next head of the family. That's not how it works. It is only given to somebody who's deemed worthy within the family, and they are not necessarily the Lord. What does worthy mean? Who gets to decide whether someone's worthy? These are questions we don't have the answer to. But I think the clear implication is at the moment there is nobody there who is worthy within House Dayne itself. I personally suspect that Darkstar will Sir Gerald Dayne from a junior branch of the house. He is definitely not worthy, but I think there's a fair to medium chance that he might steal it and proclaim himself Sword of the Morning. He's on the run now. Don't forget, he was involved in Ariane's plot, and then he basically murdered somebody, and so he's on the run. And he needs to find somewhere to go that he can hide from the Martells. He's not the kind of person who will hide, but he will need the protection of somebody who the Martells would look up to. And the most obvious answer to that, I think, is going to be young Griff, who everyone thinks is Aegon VI come back. If the Martells acknowledge him as their king, if Gerald Dayne with the Sword Dawn manages to get himself, say, on the Kingsguard, then the Martells would not be able to get at him. So that is my best answer. I don't think he is going to be deemed worthy, but I think he will take it. Right, I think that's me caught up. Oh no, G81, who's a member here for 14 months now. Thank you very much. If you want to support this channel, the best way to do that is via Patreon. There are links down in the description. But if for whatever reason you don't want to go to Patreon, then you can become a member here of this channel. There's a button somewhere. And one of the perks of that is that you can get your comments highlighted, like this one. And bit off topic, what if Ned told Cat about Jon? How would Jon's story and in that extend the whole story? What if Ned told Cat about Jon? I mean, I think he wouldn't, is the short answer. He was never going to do that. Not just because he didn't trust her. He didn't know her to start with. He barely met her. He'd been married to her for 2 weeks, then gone off and fought in a war. So there's no reason for him to trust her immediately. But more to the point, he wasn't telling anyone. And he wanted to draw a line under this whole business and move on. So I think that the answer is that he wouldn't have done. If he had, and this is probably if he thought about it in a little bit more detail, then Cat would probably have been a bit nicer to Jon. And I suspect as I don't think Ned thought at this level of detail, but I suspect that if he had thought about it, uh, he he actually quite liked, in terms of security, the fact that Cat clearly did not like Jon, and everybody could see that because that backed up his story. If she clearly didn't like Jon, and then a bit later he decided to tell her, and she suddenly changed and was like a bit nicer to him, then people might wonder why, what's gone on, and he didn't want that. So, yeah, I think the honest answer is that he wouldn't have told her. If he had, the question is, would she have changed the way that she dealt with him? And also, how would that affect her feelings in terms of Rob's will? Um, and question CGG81, thank you very much. Very generous, saying giving some mod love. That's very generous of you. Thank you very much. And I think that's me caught up. And Lady Pushkins, I just answered your question. Let's go to Commander Ray, saying, hello, Robert and Dan the dog. We all know that the story Bran was told about the Night of the Laughing Tree had much deeper meaning than was given that was given. None more, I think, than the How I Met Your Mother aspect of it. Do you think that Ashara is still alive? And do you think she staged her death as an additional cover for Jon? Because it's not that much of a scandal to just run away with the strange swamp man if nobody ever sees them again. I find it likely they wanted to hide everyone with knowledge and to give an alibi for Jon's mother that could be multiple people, and it allows the young couple peace and quiet to raise their family. Yes, I mean, I would agree with this completely. If this is a staged death, this meant that nobody was going to be looking for her, and that would allow her to just kind of disappear. In the same way that everybody thought Jon Connington was dead, so nobody looked for him. So, yes, this would give them peace to be sort of raising their family on their own. This other bit about giving an alibi for Jon's mother that could be multiple people. Yeah, I like it. I don't think that they went to this huge amount of detail about thinking through all of the implications of this. I think in terms of what will people think, Ned clearly was the view, okay, so I will just tell everyone this is my bastard child, and I won't tell anyone who the mother is, because they'll just think that I'm ashamed of, or something like that. He knew he had to, the one person he had to tell was Robert Baratheon. And he told the story that this was Willa, which seems to be the story that House Dayne have. So it actually appears that this wasn't the official plan. They hadn't thought, okay, well, we'll try and put it out there that Ned and Ashara got together. This just happened to get out there because this was one of the rumors that came out from Harrenhal that Ned and Ashara had got together. And I should probably, perhaps by way of balance, but also sort of extra context here. I think it's entirely possible that the original plan was for Ned and Ashara to marry. I don't know this. It just makes sense. And when I say the original plan, this is in terms of Rickard Stark and his kind of Southron ambitions. He sent all his children down um, to the tourney at Harrenhal. And clearly he's on this mission to build alliances with the South. So Ned, he's already put there in the Vale with the Arryns, making friends with Robert Baratheon. His oldest son, Brandon, is going to be marrying the Tullys. I think the hints are that Lyanna was there. She was left down in there for a little while to be building some relationships in the Riverlands. Um, Ned was coming up to the age where you might start to think, okay, who should he be marrying? And the attorney is the best place to be meeting all of these people. Now, why would Ashara Dayne be a sensible fit? Well, if we've already got these, if the idea is to create this network of alliances, if we've already got the Vale of Arryn on side, we've got the Stormlands through Robert Baratheon. Lyanna was supposed to be marrying him as well, let's not forget. If we've got the Tullys brought in, where do you go next? Well, Dorne makes sense, and also um, potentially the Targaryens, because as the ruling family, and if not the Mad King himself, then the person who seems very clearly out on maneuvers at the tourney at Harrenhal, trying to show people that maybe he should be put forward as the king. Maybe we should have some kind of soft coup. That seems to be what Rhaegar was planning. And how do you get close to him? Well, through the family that were best friends with him. Um, uh, and that's House Dayne. And that's the level at which Ned, as a kind of a match, should be looking anyway. Because he's the second, so he's not the first son. The first son, yes, should be looking at one of the other lords paramount, the eldest daughter there. For Ned, probably he's looking a notch down. He's the second son of Lord Stark, so he should probably be looking at one of the top tier or tier just below the Lords Paramount, like House Dayne, who are one of the uh, most renowned houses in all of Dorne. So that kind of makes sense, uh, just on a who Ned probably should have been thinking about maybe marrying or being pushed into. And he quite literally was, because his older brother Brandon, when there were all these dances going on, it seems that Ned didn't really want to dance with Ashara Dayne, or was embarrassed or something like that, and Brandon stepped in to make that happen. So if Brandon is there basically leading the Stark delegation, that seems to be the case, he is doing the matchmaking. So um, that for me kind of adds an extra layer to this, which adds to why people might think that they got together, because the idea was that they might get together. It's just that she fell in love with someone else. So that is something that we shouldn't, I think, lose sight of, and shouldn't sort of um, shy away from, is that the potential was there that perhaps they could get together, but they just didn't. Um, all of which was a bit of digression around from the fact that uh, they if they thought about it, they will have known that the rumors would have been out there about Ashara Dayne and Ned already, and so uh, this gives them the because of that, that gives them the potential for a reason why she might decide to end her own life. Because if the man that she loves cannot marry her, and her brother's being killed by the man she loves, that gives a whole reason. So it kind of all it ties together. Um, question from Hermione. There are fans who think that Septa Lemore might be Ashara in disguise. What are your thoughts? Why would she ally with Fagon? Okay, so who is Septa Lemore? She's a book only character. We meet her in A Dance with Dragons when Tyrion heads down the River Royne um, with this fantastic cast of characters who, one by one, he figures out who they are, what's going on. That guy there, that's John Connington. That is somebody who is pretending to be or thinks he's a Targaryen. Who's this Haldon Halfmaester? He's figured out what's going on there. So Tyrion, the one person that he hasn't, by the time he leaves, not of his own will, but by the time he leaves that group, the one person who he's still not 100% sure on is Septa Lemore, which adds to this kind of mystery. Who is she? Because she clearly was a scepter, but when she disrobes to bathe, then Tyrion says he can see stretch marks showing that she has had at least one child, which seems a little bit odd. Also, her general demeanor doesn't seem very demure and scepter-like, so he thinks maybe there's something else going on. So that's a bit of a mystery. Ashara Dayne, if she did fake her own death, going to Essos is a place she could try to go to escape detection. Because the other thing you have to remember about her is that this idea of going into hiding, she's one of the most recognizable people in the entire Seven Kingdoms. She's a noted beauty. She was known at one of the stars of the tourney at Harrenhal. Everybody was wanting to dance with her. She's got purple eyes, which are really hard to disguise. So if she's going to hide away, it has to be somewhere. She can't just go to Old Town or something. She has to go somewhere people aren't going. The neck works perfectly, or you could perhaps go to a completely different continent like Essos. So I kind of half understand that bit of logic. Why might she be supporting Fagon if she did think that this was Aegon, the son of Rhaegar, then maybe she would want to support him. So again, that kind of makes sense. That having had a child thing kind of makes sense. So I understand why people have come to this conclusion. Personally, I think not. Partly because of her age, which doesn't quite add up. George R. R. Martin has confirmed that she would be in her 30s. And Tyrion puts Septa Lemore in her 40s. So that doesn't quite add up. Maybe he got her age wrong. But he looks at her a lot. Uh, Not in entirely noble ways, it has to be said. And not once does he mention her having purple eyes. So that also seems quite indicative to me, that given the fact that we've already got one person who's got very Targaryen-y looking eyes and had dyed their hair, then I think if there was another person on there who had very Targaryen-y eyes, he might suspect that this was another person who had dyed their hair. So that doesn't quite add up. Added to which, also, there's the element, I think, of if, as we strongly suspect, that she knows about John, why would she go to help out somebody who it potentially could be John's rival? It's possible as a theory. I get why people quite like it, but it just feels like a long shot. Why would she study to become a Septa? Why would she go there? Why would she support Fagon? Why didn't Tyrion notice her eyes? Why does she look 10 years older than she is? All of these things, to me, suggest it's not her. And I think you'd have to come up with some pretty strong evidence other than why not, to suggest that it is her. Let's go to Madeline Tyrell Dane saying, "Hi, Robert. I'm looking forward to this stream. Ashara is one of my favourite characters. Like many others, I love your Howland and Ashara theory. If it is correct, what implications do you think it will have for future books? How much will George R. R. Martin make explicit about what happened, and how will he reveal it? Will we see Ashara, and what impact will her and her story have on the plot for the last two books?" Well, I've got a few questions along these lines. The short answer in terms of what implication might this have for the story going forward, I always want to have a really exciting answer to these things. I suspect the answer is not huge amounts. I think this will explain things that happened in the past, but in terms of her going forward, I don't personally see that she's plot necessary. She has played her part, and it was an incredibly important part. But if she now stays in the neck and rules that while Howland Reed goes off and does bits of exposition for us, that works perfectly well. So I don't think that there's a need for her to be doing anything else. That doesn't mean she won't do anything else, but I don't think there's a plot need for her to be doing anything else. As for how much will George R. R. Martin make explicit about what happened? Now, let me digress a little bit into the stage play. Now, if you've not been aware of this, this is something George R. R. Martin is working on. One of the many things he's working on in the background. He's not actually writing it, but he is actively involved in this. And this is a stage play about the tourney at Harrenhal. It currently has the title of The Iron Throne. And he's been talking about this for a while. The last update we had said that they'd made very good progress. It sounds like it's written or mostly written. They've got to the stage of pitching this to potential theatres. This seems to be looking like it will start in London. I think the expectation is that it would then move out. He's talked about New York and also Melbourne, I think, as sort of next stops. But the idea is that it would find a home in London first and then expand out beyond that. I am probably more excited about this than I am about any of the other non-book things that he's doing or involved with right now, because there are so many secrets in the tourney at Harrenhal. So many things that we can learn. He's said so much happened at the tourney at Harrenhal, you could write an entire book about it, and a George R. R. Martin book at that, like big, thick tome. There's so many subplots and things going on. This is one of those things that I could imagine he could just subtly drop in some heavy hints or clues about. We don't know which aspect this is going to focus on within the tourney at Harrenhal. It can't cover everything. I think the implication of it being called the Iron Throne means that the focus is going to be on the succession. The focus is going to be on Rhaegar setting up this tourney as a sort of a soft launch for his bid to be king. And Varys realizing this and bringing the Mad King in, and therefore preventing this from turning into a glorified Great Council. So I think that is going to be the main focus of the story, but it will have to include a number of other things along the way in order to tell that story. One of those things it will have to include is the Night of the Laughing Tree. And in order for that to kind of make sense, then we will have to see Howland Reed at some point. So he will definitely have to appear. And if we have Rhaegar, then we will have Elia. And if we have Elia, then we will almost certainly have Ashara Dayne. So the characters are going to be there. And this feels to me like one of those things that he could. Maybe it's just in the stage direction. Maybe it's not revealed in the script or anything like that. A hint about what happens there. So that I think is something that could well be real. What Ashara Dayne was up to in the tourney at Harrenhal is one of the things that could be revealed through that stage play. And for those who are wondering, it's not going to be this year. He suggested a while ago that it might be this year. I was hopeful of it being this year. It now seems more likely to be 2026. This is another of those things which is slipping. We're kind of used to that now. But this doesn't appear to be due to him not writing anything. This is just, for whatever reason, they're not finding it hard to choose a theatre or find a theatre that wants to take it, as far as I can tell. But they might be taking their time waiting for the right theatre to come along, because in London, as in many other places, then often a theatre will have a particular show on a run which goes on for quite some time, and then it becomes established there. The Mousetrap has been in the same theatre for 60 odd years in London, but it's not rare at all for shows to stay for a year, 5 years, 10 years in the same theatre. So everything is set up exactly for that one show. Maybe they're just waiting for an end of a run so that they can get a particular theatre that they want. I don't know. That's just my speculation. But anyway, that I think is how we will get some information about Ashara Dayne, about her at the tourney at Harrenhal. As for after that, we may get a bit more through Sir Barristan. He does think about her. He often thinks about her. He kind of compares her to Dany, who he has a kind of a paternal crush on. Is probably the wrong way of saying it. That sounds a bit more seedy than it actually is. But he looks at her and he remembers Ashara Dayne. It's something about the eyes, and he. So it's entirely possible when she returns, he might go off on another one of his random thinkings about Ashara Dayne, and we might learn a little bit more. But very probably we're going to learn whenever Howland Reed emerges. Right, let's go to Orion's Orcas saying, do you think she is still alive to have a story to tell, and will we ever see Howland Reed? Well, so I've got a lot of questions which are relatively similar. I don't want to repeat myself, but let's talk about Howland Reed here and this aspect here. Are we going to see Howland Reed? The answer is yes. George R. Martin has confirmed, well, he confirmed a long time ago that we will see Howland Reed. And he's confirmed we're not going to have a Howland Reed POV. And we didn't have Howland Reed around for a very long time, simply because he knows too much. That's a thing that he said, we're not going to have POV chapters from characters, and he actually name-checked Littlefinger, Varys, and Howland Reed. We're not going to have POV chapters from characters who know too much. So he will emerge at some point, and there's, I think, a fair chance when it becomes apparent that Jon is living up to his calling as the prince that was promised, his calling as perceived by some people, and we have this will which legitimizes him, which so some of the witnesses to that are currently very probably with Howland Reed. Once all of that happens, there's a chance that he could then emerge and let Jon know the truth of what was going on. Howland Reed, when he does emerge, will be walking, talking exposition man. He will be telling us about what happened back during Robert's Rebellion, what really happened. And Ashara Dayne, her story will be told at least partly through that. Shira Blackwood has gifted 5 IDG Live memberships. Thank you very much. Yes, that's if you're a member for a while, then you can get to you can give out free IDG Live memberships to people. So thank you very much. That's very kind of you for doing that. Let's go to a question from Catherine Furseth saying, not to pour too much cold water on your Howland and Ashara theory. I'm very happy for cold water. I love having these things challenged. You know that I don't come up with theories and then sort of stand by them and live and die by whether they're true. I'm just trying to come up with my best understanding of what's really going on. And when we get more information, I will change that based on that new information that's come forward. And I think that's a much better way to go about this than just coming up with a theory and saying, this is my theory, let's see whether this is right or wrong. I will have more working hypotheses when we get the next book, fingers crossed. Then we will have so much more information and I will be able to update all of this. But not to pour too much cold water on the Howland and Ashara theory, I still wonder what narrative purpose this has. Does it really matter in the greater scheme of things what happened to her? I rather like the idea that some mysteries are just unsolved mysteries that we can keep discussing over and over. What, if anything, do we lose if Ashara Dayne never shows up? For my part, I can't see that it really affects the big beats of the story. Thanks. Well, yes, I agree. Absolutely. It doesn't it doesn't affect anything if she doesn't make an appearance. It doesn't affect the big beats. Her main role has already happened, so I absolutely agree with that. But I would say we do need to understand, in order for us to have an understanding of this story, we need to know and understand what happened at the Tower of Joy. And what happened at the Tower of Joy is intrinsically linked to Ned Stark going from there to Starfall. Because he, at this moment in time, he's just achieved what he wanted. Well, he's just lost his sister, which obviously huge tragedy, but he's got this child. He could at this point just then turn around and do what Data does anyway, but he decides to go to Starfall first. Now, the reason given is to return the sword Dawn, which it kind of makes sense to an outside audience, but to us, we know that Ned is absolutely focused in at this moment in time in protecting the life of this newborn child. And his thought will not be, well, I'll return this sword first. Over through the mountains, a journey. We don't know exactly how long it is, but it looks like it's at least a week trek out of his way, going in the wrong direction. So his thought process doesn't make sense in terms of going to Starfall. So there must be another reason for him to be there, and the most likely is that they are part of this. The Danes know what's going on, and he has to help deal with Ashara Dayne, and he also needs a wet nurse who they can trust, which they can get from House Dayne, because let's not forget the baby's mother has just died. They need to find a wet nurse. They have to go somewhere that they can trust, there has to be a reason why they chose Starfall. There are closer places. House Fowler were closer, but they didn't go there. They went to Starfall. GG 81 has gifted 50 IDG Live memberships. That's very kind. Thank you very much. Lots of people have got that, so thank you very much. That's very generous to people. Callie Summers saying Rob's will is in the neck and the bearers are seeking Howland. Maybe the choice of Jon as heir is what pulls Howland out, since he knows about R plus L equals J. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I sort of touched on that a little bit ago. The point I've made of various things recently is that we've got quite the gathering of Stark loyalists going on in the neck at the moment. We've obviously got Howland Reed there. We've got Mage Mormont and forgotten who it is now. Gelbert Glover, I think, who have been, they are the signatories, the witnesses to Rob's will, but the reason they are there was to help prepare the way for Rob's attack on the north, which didn't happen because of the Red Wedding. But then we also very probably have Hallis Mollen with Ned Stark's bones. They're very probably there. So we've got this gathering of Stark loyalists in the neck. They will make an appearance. One or more of them will make an appearance in the Winds of Winter. Let's go to question from Corvus Corax saying, "Hi, Robert. Given Brandon Stark's roughish nature, would it make more sense that he dishonored Ashara at Harrenhal, more so than honest Ned or Howland? When Meera speaks of the Night of the Laughing Tree, she never mentions Howland talking to the purple-eyed maid." So I think, well, the starting point here is that dishonored that's the word Barristan Selmy uses. And we have to remember that he is a man of these great high moral principles, very old school. And so when he says dishonored, that almost certainly means she slept with someone. And he thinks that is someone dishonoring her. Now, there's absolutely no reason to think that that wasn't entirely wanted on both sides. It's only him who, let's not forget, has a massive crush on Ashara Dayne. He thinks that she's been dishonored. So that's the context we have here. Might this be Brandon? I mean, it could. But I think that there's a few points against this. First of all, he is there heading up House Stark at the time. And the only interaction we know that he had with her was actually to push his brother to dance with her, not himself. He did not dance with her. So he seems that there's no indication there that he was interested at all. Added to which, don't forget where we are. We're in the Riverlands, and that's the Riverlands of the Tully's lands, and all of the eyes of the Seven Kingdoms are on what's going on there. And this is literally a matter of a few weeks before he's about to get married to Catelyn Tully. Yes, he appears to have this kind of roguish nature, but given the fact that he's stepping up as basically acting Lord Stark here, because actual Lord Stark is up in Winterfell, do we really think that he would have slept with random other person in Tully lands just before his marriage to a Tully? Does feel like a little bit of a slap in the face, and that doesn't quite hang right. Added to which, if this was all about noises that came from Ned Stark's tent, why, if it were him, surely it'd be noises coming from Brandon Stark's tent. So yeah, I don't think we can rule it out because we simply haven't got any first-hand um, accounts of this. But all of the surrounding noise seems to suggest no. As for when Meera speaks of the Night of the Laughing Tree, she never mentions Howland talking to the purple-eyed maid. Um, uh, no, but actually, um, let me get the quote up here, just so we've got that. Now, so we've got this story of under Harren's roof, he ate, he here being Howland Reed. This is a story about Howland Reed. Under Harren's roof at Harrenhal, he ate and drank with the wolves, the Starks, and many of their sworn swords besides, Barrow-down men and moose and bears and mermen. The dragon prince sang a song so sad it made the wolf maid sniffle. There's so much going on here. As if you remember, I said that he is the main character. Everybody else is like described with their house sigils. So moose and bears and mermen. The dragon prince sang a song so sad it made the wolf maid sniffle. This is Rhaegar and Lyanna. Lyanna listened to him sing and was clearly affected by it. So again, another hint that this was more of a two-way thing than Robert Baratheon would suggest. But when her pup brother, that will be Benjen, when her pup brother teased her for crying, she poured wine over his head. A black brother spoke, asking the knights to join the Night's Watch. The Storm Lord, this is Robert Baratheon, drank down the night of skulls and kisses in a wine cup war. The Cranagman, this is Howland again, saw a maid with laughing purple eyes dance with a white sword, a red snake, and the Lord of Griffins, and lastly with the quiet wolf, but only after the wild wolf spoke to her on behalf of a brother too shy to leave his bench. So we're not told that he spoke to her, but we are told that we get, well, first of all, we get this description of a maid with laughing purple eyes. This is somebody who clearly was impressed with her, and he then notes exactly who she dances with. So he's paying attention to her through this evening. Do we hear that they speak? No. But the only reference we have to her is in relation to Howland paying attention to her. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Because we don't see them speak doesn't mean that they didn't speak. Stephanie Brendel saying, I haven't made a live chat in ages. Well, welcome. It's great to see you. So glad to be back with you guys. 7 blessings, everyone. Well, thank you very much for that. Let's go to, I think also had a question here from Nat Westwood saying, I might have things wrong. When a person is in with the Weirwoods, they are lost. I'm not sure Bran is Bran anymore. Jojen became paste. How much of Ashara is left? Has the Weirwoods cult hollowed Howland and her out? Okay, interesting. So there is nothing to suggest that Ashara Dayne is a green seer that we've seen. That doesn't mean she isn't, but there's nothing to suggest she is. So going to the neck does not mean that she's signing up to the Weirwood network in some way. Now, similarly, we get Howland, and he's not also described as being hooked up to the Weirwood network in the way that, say, Bloodraven is. In fact, he left home, he left the neck to go to the Isle of Faces, which seems to imply that that's where he wanted to go to sort of meet up with the Weirwood network, the Green Men, etc. So I don't think that the two of them are sort of lost in the Matrix, as it were. Um, as for Bran not being Bran anymore, um, I mean, I think he's in the books. He certainly is, and on the TV show, they obviously went a lot further with his storyline. So we'll have to see what happens to Bran. But certainly, when you look at Bloodraven, the way he talks and operates is he's clearly still himself. He's talking about his own thoughts and feelings on things, but he every now and then he just sort of like says, "Well, that's enough. I need," and he sort of like spaces back into the Weirwood network, as it were. So, yes, he does seem to be slowly being sucked up. It's as it this is our language, not the way George R. R. Martin, I suspect, would say it, but sucked up within uh, the the Weirwood network. Um, so I think that hopefully answers your question. As far as we're aware, Ashara Dayne is nothing to do with this. And Howland Reed, similarly, there's no indication that he's in a similar position to Bloodraven. As a principle, yes, if you do get hooked up into there, then there seems to be a lot more kind of sharing of this Weirwood network ishness. But then it doesn't seem to be like a switch. We see Bran hooking up to the Weirwood network, seeing through the tree's eyes, um, and he experiences things, but he does still seem to be him. He's not lost who he is. George R. R. Martin has not given us huge amounts on Bran with his magical learning, so maybe we'll learn more in the future. But most likely, we're just going to have a very limited number of chapters from Bran's perspective. George R. R. Martin is keen not to give us too much information too soon. And when you get characters who can literally see things in the past, then the potential is there for them to have a huge amount more information. GG81 has gifted another 50 IDG Live memberships. Thank you. That's incredibly generous of you again. And Derry's read it before, saying a crazy idea. It makes the story tied together. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure what that was referring to. Is this the Howland Reed and Ashara Dayne? Then yeah, I think that's the way that I would view it. This is say if you've never heard it before, if somebody says that, it doesn't. Yeah, it sounds crazy. But when you actually map it out into what we know happened, it not only does it fit, but it also explains some of the other things that happened around it. So yeah, that's the way that I kind of view it. Bear Island saying, "Hello, Robert. I hope you and Dan are well. We are, thank you. Many popular theories may never be directly resolved in the remaining books. The true fathers of Joanna Lannister's children, as one example. But could House Dayne be an exception? From Ashara's fate to what really happened at the Tower of Joy to the Dayne house words and anti-apocalyptic powers, we might end up with a lot of information we don't yet have, most likely presented by Howland Reed. It may be just wishful thinking on my part, but what are your thoughts?" Yeah, so I don't think it's just wishful thinking. We will get more information about the Danes. I am reasonably certain on that. Yes, I think I would agree with the first part that there will be some mysteries still out there. And I'd forget somebody a couple of questions ago. Somebody was saying, "I like the idea that there will be some mysteries." Do not worry. I think there will still be some mysteries, things for us to be debating. The example you come up with here, I think, is the classic one. I don't think we're ever going to have a 100% who might be bastard children of the Mad King out there. We're going to be left to speculate on that kind of thing. And also things like, I did a video a while ago at did Oberyn poison Tywin Lannister? I think it appears pretty logical to me that he did, but that's exactly the kind of thing that we just don't know, and we probably never will know, because he's the only person probably who would know for certain, and he's now dead, so we're not going to find out. Um, uh, but will we learn about House Dayne? I think we probably will. Um, I think I don't have the quote off the top of my head, but I think George R. R. Martin has confirmed that he knows the words for House Dayne, but he hasn't revealed them because they're a bit too spoilery, which does seem to imply that they're there for a reason. And it's obvious that the language that's there, they have a sword of dawn. The person who wields it is the sword of the morning. This just fits perfectly with the long night and the battle for the dawn. This sword probably was around during that first long night. In fact, it's quite a rabbit hole, so we won't go into it now. But it's not impossible that that sword is Lightbringer. Um, if that well, in as much as if any sword we have around right now is Lightbringer, that's probably the only one that's possible. So their role may well be hanging on to that sword. I've noted, it's not a theory, it's an observation, that lots of the things which will be important for the next long night, for humanity surviving the next long night, are on islands. We've got the Weirwood Network hub, as far as we can tell, on the Isle of Faces. We have the Dragonglass mine on Dragonstone. And the Sword Dawn is on Starfall, which is an island. So it's entirely possible that that was deliberate. We shouldn't take all of these legends being literal truth. That they went to this island because that's where the stone fell from the sky. Maybe it did, but George R. R. Martin has repeatedly told us that we shouldn't take the legends in his world as literal truth. There may be some truth in there. There may be no truth in there. So it may not be that they just happened to have landed on that place because that's where a meteorite fell. It may be that they chose that place, and then the legend of the meteorite falling emerged after that. Um, let's Cannibal the Dragon saying, I wonder what's in Queen's Crown. It's an island and good Queen Alison went there. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting islands. There's also the Quiet Isle, another one which the clear implication is that there's the High Towers have got something going on. The High Tower is on an island, and legends are that you can see the wall from there. Their sword is called Vigilance. There's a lot of hints there that they are involved in this meta narrative as well, not just an old house, the oldest house, George R. Martin has told us. All right, Sarah Arpegus saying, hello, Robert. Do you think Ashara Dayne was with Lyanna at the Tower of Joy, being a confidant and a friend? If so, might she be the one telling Jon the truth about everything? By the way, Ned Dayne would be a good match for Arya if that whole war/other thing hadn't happened. If she had to be a lady, being a Dornish one would probably suit her best. Well, on the Ned Dayne and Arya, I don't think she's going to settle down with anyone, which I think you probably would agree. Yes, I think Dawn probably is, if you had to pick one place which would work best for her in the Seven Kingdoms, then probably that. But she's Starkish. That's going to be it's her Stark nature, which is going to be the thing which draws her back. Her link to the Starks, as seen through her sword needle, which she refused to give up. So there's. I see what you're getting at. If she did have to, then yes, that's probably the best. But no, she's not going to. But on the main question, do you think Ashara Dayne was with Lyanna at the Tower of Joy, being a confidant and a friend? Yes, I think is the short answer. We don't have any information on this. We're not told this, but it makes absolute sense to me that she wouldn't be there on her own. Rhaegar wouldn't, even if we don't think that she came with them to start with. Rhaegar goes off to the war. To war. Is he really going to leave his heavily pregnant lover, wife, whatever she was? Let's not go down that rabbit hole this time. But is he really going to leave her there with no friends, no one to talk to? I don't think so. So, given the fact that the Danes were in such a huge part of what was going on there, it does kind of make sense that she was at the Tower of Joy. Added to which, as a sort of an aside, if you're trying to unpick what happened at the Tower of Joy, there are slim pickings, because a lot of what we're told happens in a fever dream that George R. R. Martin has very clearly, Ned's fever dream, George R. R. Martin has told us very clearly we shouldn't take as literal truth. But there are some things which he remembers outside of the fever dream. And one of those includes the phrase, after he's gone into the tower and found Lyanna, and then she died, and the whole "promise me, Ned" thing happens, and he kind of seems to sort of almost collapse there. All of this mental exhaustion about everything that's happened. He'd gone through all of that, and at the end of it all, she's dead. He says this line and that's where they found him, which is a fascinating line, because in one fell swoop it says it's not just Howland, because the implication of the fever dream was we got the 3 defenders, we got the 7 attackers, and then there's Lyanna. Those are the only people we're told about. The defenders all died, the attackers all died except for Ned and Howland. Who's they? Howland is one of them, but who else? There's at least one other person there. That's a complete aside. But there will have been other people there, and I think Ashara Dayne's a pretty good bet as to who it is. Right, let's go to a Mary Lou Gambit. Baby swaps are at the author's discretion. How many could George R. R. Martin slip in there before he gets bored of the trope, mayhaps? There are a few baby swaps. Baby swaps are a trope, but we've... it really depends on what you mean by a baby swap. So we've got one classic baby swap, which was manufactured by John at the Wall, which is Gilly's baby monster being swapped for Mance Rayder's baby, basically, which John does in order to protect the baby, because Melisandre is there looking to burn people with king's blood, and she thinks that Mance is the king beyond the wall, therefore his child must have king's blood, and John just wants to keep everyone safe, and so he does the baby swap. So we've got that. That's the only kind of classic baby swap. We've also got the one that we get potentially, although Varys says he did, or probably more accurate, young Griff says that he has been told that this is what happens, is that when he was a child, he was swapped out for what is called the Pisswater Prince, somebody who looked a bit like a Targaryen but wasn't, that the Mountain could kill, and everyone could think that it was him. So it was a quick baby swap, and the question is whether that did or didn't happen. Then we get John. That's not really a baby swap as so much as pretending they're different parents to the baby. So how many will he go through? I suspect that's probably it. I don't think we'll get any more kind of like um, uh, random baby swaps out there. I think we've got the one which wasn't really a baby swap, which was John. We've got the one which definitely happened, and we've got the one that uh, apparently happened, but we're a little bit suspicious about. Um, let's go to Paul Barry. I have a different take on Ashara Dayne's marriage plans, although it's not inconsistent with your theory. I think Lord Rickard, that's Rickard Stark, went to King's Landing to free Brandon by marrying Ned to Ashara. He could have planned to talk to Sir Arthur about it. As Ashara was already residing in King's Landing, Ned would effectively have been a hostage. Everyone wins. Ned gets a love marriage, Eris gets a hostage, Rickard gets his heir back, and it explains perfectly why Ned is so bloody solemn. Does it explain why she looked to Stark, which Ashara Dayne apparently did? Perhaps if Barristan even knew, but it would explain why Sir Barristan feels no animosity towards Ned. It was a proposed betrothal that never happened. Um, okay, I mean, I think this is an interesting idea. I, I don't think it. Well, I wouldn't disagree that if somebody was formally betrothed to Ashara Dayne, um, or proposed to be betrothed, then Sir Barristan probably wouldn't bear them any ill will. So I kind of get that. However, I don't think that Rickard Stark would imagine that the Mad King would, who everybody knew was mad. He had a track record of burning people by this point. This wasn't a completely new thing. This was why Rhaegar was basically plotting a coup against him. Um, don't think that Rickard Stark would expect to race down to King's Landing and say, "You've got my eldest son and heir. Shall we swap him for a younger son?" Okay. I don't think he would expect that to work. So I don't think that that's the plan. I don't think also Ashara Dayne was there in King's Landing. And I don't think that Rickard would have thought that she was there. So when I say I don't think she was there, they were being Rhaegar and Elia were based in Dragonstone most of the time at that point. Yes, they were sort of in the early part of their marriage, they were in King's Landing, but it became very apparent that King Aerys really didn't like Elia. And their baby smells Dornish, and so they kind of retreated back to Dragonstone. So that's where they were, and so and they were at Dragonstone when they set off to get Lyanna. So if Elia was there, that means that Ashara Dayne was also there, and they were brought into King's Landing once the war was there, in order was going ahead because the Mad King wanted something to hold as collateral for the Dornish to make sure that they join the war on his side. So I like the thinking, but it doesn't. For me, it doesn't quite work. Couch Ballerina picking up a question for Karen Claudino. Thank you very much. I love it when people do this. It's very kind. Karen wants to know why Illyria would. Hang on, that's just disappeared from my screen. Let me find that one again. Why Illyria would tell the story of Ned, Ashara, and Willa to her nephew Edric and say Ned and Ashara were in love. Yeah, it's a. It's an interesting one because there's no clear explanation other than trying to create this idea that there are places. Yeah, Ned could have had a child with someone else. That's the only thing really that works along with this, I think, because when you start to prod at it, it doesn't add up, and so them saying this must be for a reason. They must be because they're willing for these rumors to be sort of out there. That's I mean that's all I can kind of suggest. If somebody's got a better thought than that, I'd love to hear it, because that's the kind of thing that I do sometimes go, well, why did they do that? I suppose it's for this reason, but maybe there's more. Martin S saying, evening, Robert, and good evening to you too, sir. Right, let's go to pardon me. Let's go to a question from Mara Lee. I'm curious about House Dayne in general and their role regarding the Tower of Joy, the birth of Jon Snow, the relationship between Rhaegar and Lyanna, and the aftermath. Was Ashara with Lyanna to help in Jon Snow's birth? What do you think will be House Dayne's role, if any, in the last two books regarding Jon Snow, the prophecy, the Prince was promised, and the others? What do you see as House Dayne's future when all is said and done? So House Dayne, I've answered some of this in different questions, but let's just talk very briefly, I think, about how House Dayne's role has changed in this story, in as much as George R. R. Martin was going to have a 5-year time gap. We know this. You can see where it is. You can see the joins. He wanted all the children to age up. He wanted the dragons to get bigger and older. And you can see the main characters are at places where they could happily spend 5 years. Arya in Bravos, Jon as Lord Commander, Sam down in Old Town. All of the characters are potentially in places where they could spend 5 years. While that was his thought, he clearly had set Ned Dayne up in order for him to grow older and therefore have a role after the 5-year time gap. He changed that when he decided he didn't want to go ahead with the 5-year time gap, which is entirely fair. In case you've not come across this before, his reasoning was, I think, rather wonderfully, that he, well, partly because he would then have to spend, the opening chapters of everybody saying all the things they'd done in the previous 5 years, and that was just a little bit of an ungainly way to start a book. But also, whereas all the characters that I've talked about, he could imagine spending 5 years just buckling down, learning things, growing as a person. He couldn't imagine Cersei doing that for 5 years. There was no way that she was just going to sit there twiddling her thumbs for 5 years. She does stuff. And so her being in the position she was in meant that would have ramifications, so the plot would move forward regardless, and then he had to just write what was happening. So that's the reason why it's Cersei, because she's far too proactive. But because he didn't go ahead with this, he created a new character, Darkstar, Gerald Dayne, and that gives us, I think, a hint, therefore, as to what the idea was. So Ned Dayne, when you meet him, he seems a really nice lad. Actually, he seems like one of the good guys. He's been brought up well. He's very positive. He doesn't. When Lady Stoneheart takes over the Brotherhood without banners, then he doesn't want to stick around. Quite a few of them do leave because she changes it from a group of people who are there fighting on behalf of the small folk to a group of people who are actively seeking revenge on the Freys, which is a nuance, you might think, but for some people who are a bit idealistic about these things, this was actually very important to them. So he left and was going to head down, and presumably he was going to grow older. In Starfall, and then maybe he would become the Sword of the Morning. Darkstar, and that's how the Sword of Dawn would come into the story. Darkstar is a very different kettle of fish. He's a lot more troubled, charismatic, and dark as a character. And he, I think, will be bringing the sword into play. So, but not as a worthy holder of it. He's just going to take it. So, what does this mean about what the plan is for House Dayne? It's actually not so much about them; it's about the sword, and so that it will be brought out in a slightly different way, but that's their role going forward. In terms of you asking about House Dayne in general and their role regarding the Tower of Joy, my take is that they organised all of that. The Dornish had to be aware of the fact that the Tower of Joy was being used. This isn't just somewhere up in the middle of the mountains and nobody was there, big secret. This was one of the guard posts, the lookout posts on the Prince's Pass, which was the main way in and out of Dorne during a civil war. They will have kept a very close eye on what was going on. Are there any armies coming into Dorne? They need to know. They will have manned their watch posts. They will be keeping an eye on things. There's a whole House Fowler. Their primary role is to be keeping an eye on the Prince's Pass, to be guarding it and maintaining its defences and the like. They will all have known that Rhaegar, the Crown Prince, and some Kingsguard have pitched up in Dorne. This was not a huge secret for them. And once they're there, and the clear implication is that they were there for some time, several months, they will have had to have provisions. You can't just pitch up there and just like, oh, we'll be okay for a while. They will have had to have provisions. They will have had to get, and Rhaegar will have wanted probably a maester to be caring for Lyanna as she's pregnant and heading towards childbirth. They will have probably wanted Lyanna to have somebody there with her that she can talk to and be friends with. But fundamentally, they need somebody bringing in sandwiches, the wood to burn on the fire, water, all of these kinds of things they will have needed. And who does that? Well, I think the clear implication is that this is House Dayne who were in charge of all of that. Martin S saying happy feast of the Ascension, and to you, thank you very much. I didn't know that was today, but if you're celebrating, then I hope that it is a good one. Let's go to a question from James Perkins. Saying, hello again, Robert, and hello to you. From a narrative perspective, how do you think we will be prepared for the re-emergence of Ashara and her secrets as an active participant in the plot? We know that George R. R. Martin likes to prefigure his big story beats and give his audience little tastes of what they can expect. I'm fully bought into the whole situation with Ashara, the Dayne involvement in the Tower of Joy, the Willa deception, the baby swap at Starfall, etc. I am just curious how you think the story will break it to us that all of this has been happening behind the scenes and in the nearly forgotten past. Well, there are, I mean, I've already talked about Howland Reed. I won't talk about him again, but there are a number of other places that this information can come out from. And we're now at the point where the people who were keeping this a secret might now, this being Jon Snow's true identity, may now think, well, they might as well say some stuff because that the Robert Baratheon's gone. Jon is at the wall. there's no need for keeping this secret any longer. And who might do that? Well, the rest of the Danes. We don't know. Other Danes may suddenly appear. The Martells could do. Doran Martell almost certainly will have known at least some of what was going on. But the two people who are most likely to sort of discover outside of Howland Reed are Bran, who he will learn to travel past just through the weirwoods. And if he can go back in time beyond where the weirwoods are, then he might, as on the show, he might discover what happened at the Tower of Joy, if he's prompted to do so. So he has to have some information that makes him want to go and do that. Who might have that information? Maybe Bloodraven might. So that could be a thing that's there. And if he's prompted to think, I think is important, because the Weirwood Network doesn't just make you omniscient. You don't suddenly know everything. You'd have to know what to go and look for. You have to. So the Weirwood trees are about experiencing life. You're sort of feeling it as if you're living it there. But you don't. If you don't know where to go, then you're just looking out randomly. It seems that Bran, when he goes back in time, it does seem that he goes to important and interesting things. It's almost as if the network allows him to instinctively go into things which are interesting for him to see. When he goes back in time, he sees a woman kissing a very tall knight. He sees two children playing, going back. He sees a sacrifice before the weirwood tree. Some of this seems to be connected in with who he has an emotional connection with. He obviously sees his father. He also, the children playing seems to be Lyanna and Benjen. So there's the Benjen link. The woman kissing the very tall knight very probably is Old Nan, who Bran obviously has a link with, kissing Sir Duncan the Tall. And the suggestion here is that Sir Duncan the Tall may be related to, or in some way predecessor of Hodor. So that's where it seems that where he's got some kind of emotional connection in some way, that can draw him to it. But other than that, he has to know where to go and look. Reflective rambling. Kevin Valentino, why was Edric Dayne squiring for Beric Dondarrion anyways? Marsh Lords and Dornish Lords are notorious rivals. It's a good question. Beric Dondarrion was engaged to a Dane. And Ned, as part of this, Ned was then squiring for Beric. Now, we're not told the background to that, but the sort of the implication that follows on from that is, I think, quite instructive. Ned Stark, when he's faced with this, with these reports that the mountain is out there in the Riverlands causing untold amounts of damage, his first instinct is to go himself, to go and deal with this. But he can't because his leg's injured. And so he then has to think, who can he trust to lead this group of people? And he picks Beric Dondarrion, which sounds like it's a random pick, but actually the only family that we know of that recently the Danes have been allying themselves with has been House Dondarrion. And so Ned who knows that he can trust House Dayne completely, will have looked at that and gone, if they trust him, I will trust him. So that's the sort of the implication that goes on from there. We haven't been told, I think, the reasons why why those two got together, but Edric Dayne squiring for Beric Dondarrion is because Beric Dondarrion was engaged to marry one of the Danes, and one of the tragic things that he talks about when he comes back is he can't remember what she looks like. Each time he comes back, he loses a bit more of himself. Um, People talking about a community scoreboard and reflective rambling saying YouTube's doing something weird, seems like increasing people spending money through the revenue with, I think this is something to do with this XP thing. I've literally no idea what's going on there. I will have a look at this. I will tell you next week what I discover. So I've no idea. I don't know what you can see there. I haven't ticked any boxes or anything to change anything. So I will find out what that is, and then I will let you guys know next week. Um, uh, let's go to a question from Stephen. I have an out of left field question about Ashara Dayne. Without an available daughter, King Aerys was desperate to find a bride for Rhaegar to secure the family line and to deny Tywin's marriage ambitions. He struggled to find anyone suitable and even sent Steffon Baratheon to Essos on a doomed mission to find a match. He finally settled on Elia Martell, an arrangement he seemed unhappy with. But why did he not choose Ashara Dayne instead? She was the right age for Rhaegar, she certainly had the looks, and her brother and Rhaegar were best friends. So her name must have been known to the king, and Danes and Targaryens had married before, so noble rank should not have been an impediment. Could there be a personal or political reason why Elia Martell was chosen and not Ashara Dayne? Perhaps Rhaegar or Arthur did not want the marriage, or perhaps Aerys um, uh, or perhaps Aerys wanted Dorne as allies against Tywin, but the Martells demanded their own daughter for the marriage pact. Yes, so in terms of sort of the Rhaegar's marriage, the hope I I kind of suspect was that he might have married a sister, but that did not happen. They did not have a sister did not come along for a long time. In fact, Rhaegar grew up for a very long time thinking that he was the only Targaryen from that line, which is a big part, incidentally, of why he originally thought that he was the prince that was promised. It's not spelled out to us like that, but he thought the prince that was promised had to come from the line of his parents, and he's the only one from that. So he must be the prince that was promised. Um, if you're at this point saying, "Hey, but what about Daenerys?" Daenerys wasn't born until after the Mad King was dead and Rhaegar was dead. So at no point did he have a sister. So Aerys was probably holding out for something which didn't happen, and then he he sent Steffon Baratheon off, as you say, to go and try and find a bride with Valyrian heritage in Essos. Steffon came back empty-handed, which is odd. It has to be said, because there are a lot of people with Valyrian heritage in Lys and other places in Essos, and I'm sure at least some of them would be tempted by the idea of marrying the future king. So that is in and of itself quite an odd thing, which we've not really probed in any detail, it has to be said. But when that happened, at round about this point, we're not told, but he then married Elia. The feeling is that this was probably Rhaegar pushing things, because he he moved very quickly from that point. The marriage, they're not actually married for very long. And I don't have the exact timings in front of me, but it's like they married and then less than a year later, Elia had their first child, and then a year later they had the second child, and then there was just a very short pause, and then he heads off to go and get Lyanna because Elia couldn't have any more children. He seems in a rush to have children. Perhaps this is almost certainly this is connected with his thoughts on prophecy and the feeling that he seems to then be trying to build the dragon with three heads, naming his firstborn son Aegon, and then Rhaenys. He very clearly was trying to get a Visenya. So the extent to which this was Aerys's choice is not made 100% clear. But in terms of a political marriage, then marrying the Martells was far stronger than marrying the Danes. Yes, there is a Dornish from House Dayne person who married into the Targaryens before. That was the wife of Maekar, but he wasn't, at the time he got married, he wasn't heir. He was a lower down the rankings. He was not expecting to inherit at all. So that wasn't a matter of who do we get who might be a future queen. Having the Dornish on board with the future queen, you would go for, if you could, the Martells rather than the lower ranked house. So that's what's going on there. Cast Ballerina, how long was Ned in SF? I assume he means Starfall. Did Willa go with Ned to Winterfell as Jon's wet nurse? If not, then who? Why would Winterfell staff have rumors about Ashara if they met Willa? Okay, so Willa appears to be, at least Ned Dayne claims, the wet nurse to Jon. So that is why she is there. Now, as far as we can tell, she did go with Jon up to Winterfell and then presumably headed back down south again. She wasn't about to be spreading the rumor that this was her child with Ned Stark up in Winterfell. Why would you? But the very clear implication, because Ned calls himself and Jon milk brothers. So they, because she was his wet nurse, so that she almost certainly headed up. I think a lot of the time we just make this assumption that Ned went with Jon on this journey. That's not necessarily the case when you're reading the text. Ned went back to King's Landing because he had to make up with Robert Baratheon, and he had to talk to him and explain about, Lyanna's dead, all of those kinds of things. So he had to do that. There's no implication that he brought baby Jon with him to King's Landing. The implication is that he sent baby Jon ahead with the wet nurse, and then he caught up later. So that's and because when Kat says she arrived to find Jon already there, she didn't say she arrived to find Ned already there with Jon. Baby Jon was there. How long was Ned in Starfall? We're not told. In fact, George R. R. Martin has been very clear that he has kept deliberately vague the timings around there. But I think we can probably, you can sort of read between the lines on these kinds of things. We can probably assume this wasn't very long, a handful of days at most, for the simple reason that once the war was over, that's the point at which we get Kat heading north. Now, with Maester Luwin and baby Robb. Now, they surely were traveling quite slowly. Um, but at the same time, that's when the clock starts ticking, because we know that baby John makes it up to Winterfell first. So, in order for that to work, Ned, that he definitely didn't spend weeks there or months or anything like that. This was a matter of a few days. George R. R. Martin's not going to give us accurate timings for it, but that's the order of things. Cloud my coffee saying, "Sorry, Robert, we were talking amongst ourselves." If that's the case, that's fine. Kolnitsky saying you get XP for every comment, like in RPG for killing monsters. Okay. I Yeah, I mean that sounds it's just like a YouTube thing trying to encourage people to make more comments. Don't think there's yeah. I'll have a look into it, but um, if you enjoy collecting XP, that sounds good. Let's go to Zvibo saying, "Hi, Robert. I've been loving these mystery streams recently. If Ashara Dayne is indeed with Howland Reed, do you think she has any additional independent role to play in the ongoing story, aside from that of Howland and the Jon Snow situation? The Danes more generally still feel potentially important to the endgame, and is there really any need anymore to actually keep her identity a secret?" Um, I mean, I think I've kind of answered this one already, but I agree. We have reached the point where we now do not really need to. The only thing I suspect for someone like Howland or Ashara is when is the best time to reveal this information to John? Because that's the equation that you've got to work with. The moment that you tell people, actually, this guy who you thought was a Stark bastard, who's now been legitimized and he will be the Stark Lord, or in fact King. Um, the moment you say, actually, he's also, we think, heir to the Seven Kingdoms, that changes the equation hugely. And not for John, perhaps. He's probably still, I don't want that. I'm focused on the North right now. But there will be people who fall in behind him. So the question is, when do you say this? Um, uh, Probably if he's not diverting from the course that you want him to go down, you can hold on to that secret for a little while longer. Um, People who care about him, though, will want him to know. And that, I think, is the thing which is sort of like pulling the other direction. He desperately, you can see his internal monologue all the time. He desperately wants to know who his mother is. And he kind of feels he's now never going to find out. But this really, it impacts him. Um, so people who care about him will want him to know as soon as possible. Um, uh, let's go to Yeldanil saying, "Hi, Robert. Do you think that Meera Reed could be the Sword of the Morning if she is indeed Ashara's daughter? She seems to be a worthy protector of Bran, the apparent future king, and if she's a Dane descendant, she might qualify. How would Dawn reach her? And do you think we'll get to see Ashara in the books?" Um, so I think we will see. Having said, I don't think she'll have a big role to play. I don't think she'll have a big plot role to play Ashara going forward. But that doesn't mean we're not going to see her. I think there's a reasonable chance that we will, um, and it might be one of those things that doesn't get 100% confirmed. We'll just get a description of her as Gianna, but with the purple eyes. So that's possible. If Meera Reed is Ashara's daughter, does this mean that she could be Sword of the Morning? Well, I think technically no, in as much as this seems to be a Dane. Now, yes, she was born to a Dane, but uh, she's now part of House Reed, and we don't know the exact mechanism for choosing who could be the Sword of the Morning, but it does appear to be somebody who is a Dane, is a part of that family, not somebody who sort of joined another family. So technically, I suspect no. Thematically, might this happen? Yes, I think it's entirely possible. I think the sword is going to come back into circulation in King's Landing. Um, I th- I think that if the theory is right, if Gerald Dayne does have it and become a member of the Kingsguard for Fagon, I think Fagon's rule will be probably actually quite good and positive, but short. And I suspect that that means that we then are left with, well, what happens with Gerald Dayne? Might it be one of those situations where the Kingsguard just moves across to support another king or queen, as it might be in this case? It's not clear. But the other person who might potentially wield it is Jon. If this is Lightbringer, as is possible, then this is a sword that Jon, as the prince that was promised, some think, might well wield the sword. So it arrives at King's Landing. Let's say Dany takes over at some point. That's how it could get to the north. Let's go for my peoples. Do we have a POV character near the neck that could let us see Ashara whenever Howland emerges? Not not specifically near the neck. We've got plenty of POV characters, or some POV characters, in Jaime and Brienne, who are in the Riverlands, and they could potentially head north. But we don't have any currently in the neck. No. Are there any that could later see a shower? I mean, George R. R. Martin has never said we're going to see Greywater Watch. It could well be one of those things that he just doesn't show us. So we're not going to see, unless Ashara emerges along with Howland, which is entirely possible. And Howland heads north because he's got business with Jon, say. That's the point at which we've got plenty of POV characters in the north, and any of whom could see her. The other way is if she's decided that she now doesn't need to hide anymore. When a character goes through from the south, goes up the King's Road, heading to the north, then she might decide to station herself not Greywater Watch, but at Moat Cailin, actually on the causeway. Sort of guarding the north. So that might be, and then we could have any number of characters who sort of head up that way who might therefore theoretically see her. Let's go to Stephen saying, "Hi, Robert. I like your theory about Ashara and Howland Reed. I hope it is correct. But even if it is, do you think that Ned Stark had feelings for Ashara, perhaps unrequited? Could his refusal to discuss her be at least partially due to heartache or guilt that he loved another woman before Catelyn?" I mean, this is one of those things where I say it's possible. Yes, there's no doubt he did dance with her, and we're told that he was shy. Which is why he didn't ask her to dance. The question you have to ask is that why was it that Brandon was so keen that he danced with her? Is it because Brandon saw that Ned really liked her and he was just kind of trying to push his little brother in the right direction, or was this Brandon taking on his role as acting head of House Stark and saying, well, that's a potentially politically important marriage that could happen there. So it's left a little bit open to sort of interpretation. But I mean, I think the biggest thing, well, two things. Firstly, is that his reaction when Kat says the name Ashara Dayne, for me, is so strong, so out of character that there is something more here than just this kind of like leftover feelings of guilt. Um, uh, he doesn't care just about whether Kat mentions it. He doesn't want anyone mentioning the name. It's almost like this name is verboten. This cannot happen. This name is never being uttered again. He wants to completely shut it down, which fits, I think, with this idea. Firstly, he wants people to not think about her. He wants to protect her. He wants her to have this new life in the next. That, I think, is part of the answer. Another part is that Ned was traumatized by what happened during the war. He was traumatized by the Tower of Joy. Everything, his actions all point to this. When you see his thinking from his POV chapters, it's very clear he doesn't want to engage in thinking about the past. He wanted to draw a line under it and just move on. So there's that. And I think the other thing is, if he had been in love with Ashara Dayne, there's no hint of it in his chapters. We get a lot of chapters from Ned's perspective in book one, obviously. And there's not a hint of him in the same way that Sir Barristan sees Dany and Dany reminds him of the woman he once loved. There's nothing of that. So it's very clear he is in love with Kat, and that seems to be the end of that. Like Callie Summers saying, Meera and Jon are twins, and with Dany are the three heads. Yeah, you gave me a little winky emoji there. Yeah, no, I don't. So the Meera and Jon are twins theory really emerged from the TV show. It has to be said. I suspect some people may have speculated something along those lines before in the books, but it got popularized by the TV show for the simple reason that the actors playing those two characters have very similar curly dark hair, and so people were saying, they look like they might be twins, and they're both very clearly very serious characters. They're good fighters, and they sort of like they did echo each other quite a lot. There's in the books, there's nothing here, I think, to suggest this. No, I mean, I struggle. The only thing is that we know that they were born at roughly the same time. They're sort of the same age, and so there are a few children who were all born at around the same time. That does not mean that they are twins. There is nothing in Ned's thinking which means that he sees the twins of or sees Cersei and Jaime, and he's thinking, oh, that reminds me of some other twin. No, I shouldn't think about that. There's none of that. There's no thought whatsoever. There's no indication that any of this happened, and no need for it, I think, as well. If you have two children, which they did, two babies, and they have to decide where these two babies go, there's no added need for them to be twins and siblings. Right, let's go to question from Ninja Robbo, saying, I suppose this is more a question what if about Barristan, but do you think they would have made a good couple? Barristan is often painted as being at the height of knightly virtue, but what do you think he would have done with Ashara if she was interested? And what might Arthur have thought or done if they did? Um, but I mean, he thinks about this. So he thinks about the fact that he had these feelings for her, uh, and he thinks, should he have told her about these feelings? And he thinks this: he was a knight of the King's Guard, sworn to celibacy. No good could have come from telling her his feelings. He then goes on to this, perhaps that's she turns to Stark. Would she have turned to him if he'd like done this or that? And he wonders it, but he is very clear in his mind this couldn't ever happen, and he didn't go down that route. Would they have been a good couple? No, because he would have been plagued with guilt about the fact that he was breaking his vows. Um, when he says the height of knightly virtue, he has his own morality that he tries to keep up with. And I think that him breaking his Kingsguard vows would have broken him. So, and that would clearly have affected the relationship. Mara Lee, hi there, good to see you. Saying, what will Meera Reed's role be in the last two books? Well, she's now going to, well, take Bran back down south to Winterfell is the short answer, which makes her sound like she's just like the taxi driver. In a way, sort of. So Jojen's gone, and we know what will happen to Hodor, and so she's the one who will be taking Bran can't walk there on his own, so she's the one who's going to have to take him back down south again. So that's going to be her main role. The TV show, lots of people noted it at the time. The TV show, it felt like they didn't really know what to do with her. They arrived back in Winterfell on the TV show, and then she just like mopes around a bit, and then says, "Well, I'm going to go back home then." And she does, and it just felt like a bit. Well, she could at least have sort of hung around and fought or something. Um, I do wonder whether this was, and they did this kind of thing a lot with the TV show, kind of like a half-heartedly nod at what happened, what might happen in the books. I wonder whether this is a half-hearted nod towards that on the in the books. Then she will get Bran back there, and then she will head back to the Neck to see her father. And that is the thing that prompts Howland Reed to emerge. I do wonder whether that's it. But her main role is to ensure that Bran gets back to Winterfell, I think. Let's go to Al-Had. And saying, hello, Robert. What is the plot function of Ashara Dayne? She is clearly given some significance in the story. She might be knowing too many secrets and may be witness to some. If your theory is right, she might be romantically involved with Howland Reed. Still, her past actions do not move the story forward, like Howland Reed. I think her past actions do move the story forward in as much as, well, we don't know all the details, but if she was there with Rhaegar when he picked up Lyanna, and she stuck with Lyanna all this time. And let's not forget that they were both pregnant at about the same time. So they will have been naturally quite close to each other. So I think it's very easy to sort of say there's no plot advantage in that. She will be the connection between Lyanna and be there with her, and the connection back to Starfall. So yeah, I think she's got a role. I think we will probably find that she also has some other role, perhaps somehow Ned knows where to go to get to the Tower of Joy. Now, there are a number of ways that you can look at this, but it seems very clear. By the time he gets to Storm's End, he knows where Lyanna is. He has to have found out. Robert Baratheon, who he was with most of the time, clearly didn't know. Ned did know. How does he know? Well, I think the clear implication is that Howland Reed might have told him. How did Howland Reed know? Well, maybe Ashara Dayne told him. This is where I am. He will be, if um, let's speculate, if she did have a baby Meera, at around that same time, and if Howland is the father, then she will want Howland to know where she is and what's going on. And that is a reason for Ned knowing where to go, because he went straight there. He didn't hunt around randomly the countryside, aimlessly looking for different places. No, he took a small group of people and went directly to where Lyanna was. So, yeah, if I had to guess, that's one of the other things. And there may be more things that she did. It's just that we don't know all of the iterations about what she was up to. Let's go to Lady Vaughan-Strauss. While Ashara's beauty clearly attracted many admirers, did she ever have any legitimate suitors or true potential candidates for marriage? Do the Dornish typically encourage love matches, or would her position as a Dane make her a potential match prosaically political? Well, we don't know whether she had any legitimate suitors or potential candidates. Because we don't know a huge amount, as we mentioned at the beginning, mentioned by name only 6 times. But we are told who she danced with at the at Harrenhal, and I think it's probably best to imagine this is a kind of like, this isn't just like they danced together. This was like the equivalent of like the Jane Austen ball. That's the kind of feel that it won't be exactly like that, but that's the kind of feel. You're there. Who you dance with has political implications. Who you dance with may well have personal implications, but you're paying attention to who the different people are dancing with. And who does she dance with? Well, we have the list. She danced with a white sword, a red snake, and the Lord of Griffins, and then with the Quiet Wolf. So who is this? A white sword. It could be her brother, who is both a member of the Kingsguard, and also, because he has the sword Dawn, it's white. So perhaps that's it. Maybe she danced with her brother. Another option is that this could be another member of the Kingsguard. A white sword. Maybe Sir Barristan plucked up the courage to dance with her, but didn't pluck up the courage. This is younger Sir Barristan, obviously, but didn't pluck up the courage to tell her how he felt. So that's the first person she danced with. Then she danced with a red snake. This isn't 100% clear, but it could perhaps be Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper. Then she and why would she be dancing with him? Well, 2 possible reasons. One is he's the brother of Elia, who she's handmaiden to, so he knows her. The other is that Oberyn, well, we know what Oberyn's like. So those are the 2 options you've got going on there. And then we get the Lord of Griffins. That's John Connington. He was a very good friend of Rhaegar. He was also gay. And then she dances with the Quiet Wolf, which is Ned. So what do we make of this? Well, certainly the first 3 were kind of like keeping it close. If this was her brother or a member of the Kingsguard, then this was not a from her perspective, at least, she was dancing with somebody who nobody would think that this was a potential match. Then the Red Viper, Oberyn Martell, again keeping it close, the brother to her lady. People will have known what he was like, but would they think that he would be a potential good match for her? It doesn't seem that he's the person who would potentially want to settle down and marry anyone. And then there's John Connington, who again, good friend of Rhaegar, and clearly didn't have any interest in her. It seems as if she's kind of like playing it safe with her dance partners there. So did she have any legitimate suitors that we know of? No. I think the one most likely in the context is Ned, who was too shy to ask her to dance, but then got pushed into it by his older brother. And as I said, that as a political marriage, that makes quite a lot of sense between those two. Do the Dornish typically encourage love matches, or would her position make her potential match political? Well, there has to be a bit political in the way that the Game of Thrones is played. But and from what we can see when we get to kind of the Dornish chapters from Arianne and Arya Hotar and things like that, then yes, the politics is played very much there about matching up different families. So Dawn is no different to anywhere else, I think, is the short answer. We don't know whether she had any legitimate suitors. Very probably she did have legitimate suitors. But I think if there were a good match anywhere in Westeros, really, then if it can be a love match that works well as a good political match, that's so much the better. DickCrabb'sSquire, slightly tangential, but what could Varys and Illyrio have planned for Tyrion? I do not think it could be good. When Illyrio finally links up with Duck and Haldon, he is speaking in a tongue Tyrion doesn't know, obviously discussing something they do not wish him to know in case he awakens and hears the conversation. Griff does not allow Tyrion to see the letter that explains his presence. Why not just show it to him, unless it's not good? Obviously, Tyrion's purpose is to track Dragonlaw to young Griff. Oddly, on Hadron's first words to Tyrion are testing his knowledge of dragons. And if Griff truly despises Tyrion, why does he not just let him drown? Could Griff's initial hostility be that he does not want Tyrion along because he knows their final plans are not good for Tyrion? So this is what is the what does John Connington want from Tyrion? I think the setup here, for me, I can understand why you might think that they might have some sort of underhand motivations. For me, the setup does work. Tyrion has been sprung from King's Landing by Varys and sent to Illyrio. And this is not the first or only time he's done this. He seems to certainly want to get competent people out of King's Landing, competent people who might help defend King's Landing. Tyrion has shown that he can do that. So he wants to get him out. And if he can get him over to their side, so much the better. So that will be... Varys will have sent an equivalent letter up to Illyrio saying, I attach Tyrion. He might be useful. He's clearly a Lannister. He hates his sister, who is currently being Queen Regent in King's Landing, and he may be able to join your side. If so, he's incredibly competent, and he would be a good person to have on our team. That would be the kind of letter that Varys sends. I think they probably had an understanding between them, such as that if it turns out that Tyrion wasn't going to work out, then yeah, I'm sure they would have got rid of him. But Tyrion doesn't do anything which is that bad during that time. He tries to get drunk a lot, but he's clearly intrigued by this idea of going to see Daenerys and dragons, and so plays along with this. Why, when they first met up with Howland, were they speaking a language Tyrion didn't know? That just seems natural caution. So Haldon wasn't expecting Tyrion to be there, and so he will. There's somebody else in there. I'll talk to you in another language because I now have to have the conversation. Can we trust this guy? Not in the language that he probably knows. Why not show the letter to John Connington? Well, it will. I mean, why would you? That's a thing which is like of a letter from one person to another person. You don't have to show it to the third person that is being talked about. So I don't see the need for this to be nefarious. It could well have said, that letter could well have said, this guy knows a lot about dragons, get him to teach young Griff about dragons. If he is anything of a nuisance, then kill him. It could well have said that, in which case they wouldn't have shown him, but that doesn't mean that they're planning to necessarily kill him. If they could get a Lannister on their side, particularly an incredibly competent Lannister who hates Cersei, that would be a good thing for them. Andrew K saying seeing through Tyrion's analytical eyes is great reading. It absolutely is. One of my favourite chapters for a long time. Oh, it was my favourite chapters. I think I've probably moved on to for sheer enjoyment. Cersei's chapters are just so crazy. I think I'm probably enjoying them even more now. Anyway, that's a digression. Randabim Mitra, I hope you're well and excited for Matthias Cunha. I am indeed. 2 Lord of the Rings questions. We have got a couple more questions sort of back with Ashara Dayne, so don't know, but I will answer these ones now. In the pre-recorded live stream about the Second Age in Middle-earth, I asked about Sauron potentially gathering forces in construction of Barad-dûr. Could dwarves have been involved in its construction? We know that the 4 clans in the east were involved in the last alliance on both sides of the war, and also Barad-dûr is one of the most sturdy and well-fortified places in Middle-earth. Is that because of the involvement of dwarven construction techniques? This is a great question. We don't know exactly who built Barad-dûr, Sauron's fortress. Might it have been dwarves? It's entirely possible. It certainly doesn't seem to be orc work, so to speak. It was shaped by magic as much as anything else. So Sauron, and it's intrinsically tied into Sauron himself and the ring. When the ring was destroyed, that's when the Black Tower fell, because it was created using the power, Sauron's power. So dwarves may have been involved. We do not know. But it wasn't them that made it quite as exceptional and powerful as it was. And then secondly, a fun question about kinslaying from Lexi, Girl Next Gondor. If incidentally, if you're random recommendation, if you're a fan of Tolkien, Girl Next Gondor is a fantastic channel. Could Feanor actually not be the one at fault for the kinslaying at Aquilonde? Pendolo, who wrote the Quenta Silmarillion, was born after the flight of the Noldor, at a time when hating Feanor and his sons was the popular thing to do. You confirmed your stance on the elf propaganda topic, so can it not be an elf-on-elf propaganda as well? Of course, we have no evidence for this, so we'd love your insight. So the kinslaying at Aquilonde happened. Who is to blame? Could it have been someone other than Feanor? I guess it could have been. Could this be the kind of unreliable reporting? Yep. it's definitely possible. But this is just one of those things where, okay, he was definitely there. He was definitely angry. He was definitely capable of doing it. Um, uh, there's if it's not him, who was it? Yeah, it's possible. It's possible that somebody else could have been behind that, but I don't think the story requires it. Let's go to Lord Medici, who asks how much we actually know about how the Kingsguard was split between the Eris and Rhaegar factions at court. Um, and I'll read the first part of this. I hope you'll forgive me for not reading all of it out. But you say to recap, the 7 members at the time were, I think you do a good summary here: Gerald Hightower, Jonathan Darry, Arthur Dayne, Jaime Lannister, Lewin Martell, Barristan Selmy, and Oswell Went. I feel fairly confident, you say, about where Arthur Dayne, Oswell Went, and Jonathan Darry stand. And I would agree. So Arthur Dayne clearly was best buddies with Rhaegar, so he was Team Rhaegar. Oswell Went, all the hints suggest that he was also part of Team Rhaegar, not only because he was there at the Tower of Joy, but also because the implication is that it was through him and his family, the Wents, who were in charge of Harrenhal at the time, that the tourney at Harrenhal was set up as a way for Rhaegar to potentially push his claim to take over from his father as king, which clearly implies that Oswell Went was on Rhaegar's side. Jonathan Darry, yeah, we don't know huge amounts about him, but his brother seems to have been a Targaryen loyalist, and he seems to be. You give the example here. He seems to be the person who, when Jaime overhears Aerys being abusive to his wife, Jonathan Darry's the one saying, "No, we just don't do anything. Uh, let them do the things. The king is the king. We just follow him no matter what." So he definitely seems to be doing his job, and therefore in Team Aerys. But what about the other ones? So Jaime, I think we know where Jaime stands on this. He was very new recruit to the Kingsguard, and was recruited to spite Tywin Lannister as much as anything else. He obviously ended up killing King Aerys, but he was never really on Team Rhaegar. We did get, Jaime remembers one conversation where Rhaegar's about to ride off to at the Battle of the Trident, where he will die, and he basically says things will change when I come back. I'll tell you about it all when I come back. The clear implication is that he wasn't in on Rhaegar's plans, but Rhaegar thought that he probably could be won to his side. So that was where he was. And then the other 3 are Barristan Selmy, Lewin Martell, and Gerald Hightower. Well, Barristan Selmy was, he had his own, we've talked about him earlier, but he had his own set of morals, and felt very keenly his Kingsguard vows to be protecting the king. So he was, I suppose we could call him Team Aerys, but not out of particular affection for Aerys so much as he was just doing his job and upholding it in an honourable way as he saw it. Similarly, we don't know too much about Gerald Hightower. The implication is that he was more on Aerys' side, in that he stayed in King's Landing with him. Lewin Martell is slightly more complex because he was uncle to Elia, who was obviously married to Rhaegar, so he had that familial link with Rhaegar. And Aerys didn't really trust him. it's quite clear he didn't trust the Martells. He brought Elia in to King's Landing so that he could hold her hostage, basically, to try and force the Martells to do what he wanted. Um, so, although he appears not to be in Rhaegar's inner group, he does instinctively seem to be more supportive of Rhaegar because of the familial link. But at the same time, he clearly doesn't do anything much about it. So yeah, they're an interesting bunch, but it's probably fair to say that there were those who supported Rhaegar because they supported him personally. The ones who were supportive more of Aerys they supported him because that's their vows to support the king. Chaos Ballerina. Is Ashara the stupid lady Arya heard Darian sing about that killed herself because her prince was dead? Is Prince an artistic license for any nobleman, or is he Rhaegar? I don't know the answer to that. Darian saying, I don't know. I think we have any context for that. Killing herself because her prince was dead. Possible. But Prince is not. Yeah, it would have to be artistic license for her noble rather than Rhaegar. There's no implication that she died. She killed herself because of Rhaegar was dead. That's not said by anyone. Her heart was broken. The implication was by love, but also because her brother was dead. Auntie Slayer saying, Hi, Robert and chat. Last stream I was able to attend. You asked me to email you regarding the Discord. I sent that. Thank you. I will pick that up. I haven't managed to find. I did have a look for it, but thank you. I will look at that and I will try and get the Discord set up. Thank you. I know a lot of people are wanting that, and so I will get to that. And yeah, feel free to keep reminding me and hassling me if I forget. It's just I'm a forgetful person. Sorry. Nick Gull saying, Hello, Robert. All is well. I hope all is well. It is. Thank you. I'm sorry this is not about the topic, but I had to ask. I was rewatching your Blackstone video, and I love the theory about the oily Blackstone being the shade of the evening tree. Is now my head canon. My question about the video, though, is if the shade of the evening trees are corrupted weirwood trees and drinking the shade of the evening drink unlocks your magic ability in some way, then the Jojen paste theory does not make sense to me anymore. Why would Bran need Jojen paste and not just normal weirwood paste? Because it would probably unlock abilities as well. I just hope I'm missing something because I'd really like both theories to be true. Okay, so for those who missed the Blackstone theory, theory about the oily Blackstone being the shade of the evening tree. So this wasn't. I gave credit in the video as well. I think this wasn't something I initially came up with. I first saw this with Amanda, Disputed Lands, excellent channel. If you ever get a chance to watch some of her videos, the idea is that you get a shy is built out of this oily black stone, we're told, that seems to drink in light. Now, that description echoes the shade of the evening. So Dany goes to the House of the Undying. She passes through this grove of trees, shade of the evening trees, which we're told kind of drink in light. So given the fact that Shade of the Evening Trees are clearly some kind of, even if it's only thematic, opposite of weirwood trees with their black and blue compared to red and white colouring, that you get some kind of drink that comes from them that unlocks some kind of magical powers, sort of ability to see visions and the like. It's and the leaves look quite similar, so that they appear to be sort of a dark or distorted version of weirwood trees. There are plenty of theories about why that might be, but one thing we know about weirwoods is that if you chop them down, the weirwood tree sort of turns to stone, white stone. So the theory is that if you chop down a shade of the evening tree, then it turns to black stone, which keeps the property that you had from the shade of the evening tree of drinking in light, and also the shade of the evening drink, one of the words which is used to describe it is oily, which means we're looking at oily black stones. So perhaps Ashai, massive city, but perhaps Ashai was built from shade of the evening trees, which slowly over time have turned to stone, black, oily stone. And because they are about death surrounding the House of the Undying, etc., that is why Ashai as a place is a place of death, of no life. This is why nothing grows there. So it's a great theory. It's a great theory. I can say this because I didn't come up with it initially, but it just works for me. Now, the question you've got is why you need to have Jojen sacrificed in order to make weirwood paste to unlock Bran's third eye, effectively his ability to utilize the weirwood network. It strikes me that two different things are happening. What happens with Bran is the idea is to unlock his ability to go through the weirwood network and sort of take him up to the next level as being a green seer. It's expanding his powers that he can then use them in the future. That's the idea of the weirwood paste. Shade of the Evening doesn't seem to do that. It seems to be a short, sharp burst of visions that you have no particular control over. Dany has this. She goes into the House of the Undying. She can't really control what the visions come at her from all sides. She can't really control it. We see Eren Damphair being forced to drink some of it in the Forsaken pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, and he seems to have these visions that he has no particular control over. But in neither case is there the implication that this has unlocked something in them. They are now at a higher magical level, and they can now access this whenever they need to. So the weirwood paste and the Bran has seems to be operating at a different level. So the Jojen paste theory that he is a sacrifice that allows the creation of this weirwood paste, which allows Bran to access this higher type of magic, that requires a sacrifice. And the Shade of the Evening drink has not had a sacrifice, so that's not what that does. Hopefully that allows you to hold those two theories together. Actually, I think that was the last question I had from oh no, I have one more I just missed out. This is my last question for my patrons. It's not specific to Ashara Dayne, but now is a good time. If you've got any more questions, I will try and pick up as much as I can in the chat. Nick from NJ saying, I have a question about Arya and the Faceless Men. They clearly know that Arya continues to harbour ulterior motives, but they continue to train her. Even when they punish her for stealing a life from the many-faced god, it is a temporary blindness. And the kindly man states that they would have done so anyway as part of her normal training. What ulterior motive can we infer on their part, if any? I did a whole series of videos on Faceless Men. If you're interested, do go and check them out, including why did they recruit Arya? And the answer to that is that Jaqen doesn't seem to have proactively gone out and looked for her, but she was just perfect. That's the kind of implication of what we've got going on here. Is what do you want? You want somebody who is unafraid to kill people and have people die. You want somebody who takes on lots of different identities, which she did. She had a different name almost every chapter. Um, you want somebody who's still young and impressionable, but already has some skills in uh, using the sword and the like. You want somebody who is clever, can think on their feet, somebody who will not be missed if they go over to Bravos. So she kind of like ticked all these boxes, and it seems that Jaqen kind of hung around. He had another mission to do down in Old Town, but he hung around for a little bit just to test this out, and then decided, yeah, we will recruit this person. So that seems to be the starting point. Um, then yes, you're very right that they are, despite her clearly not buying into this no one idea, uh, despite her clearly clinging on to her Stark heritage and ideas and going against what they say, they are sticking with her. Um, so why? I think the answer has to be that this isn't what she thinks this is. This isn't them just training her up to be an assassin and to be no one. Um, Partly because our concept of no one is not exactly what it appears to be. We see the um, assassins. Arya serves them. They're in this underground. It's a really cool scene. They're an underground room, and they get the list. It's almost like something from a James Bond film. It's like all the villains there around this table, and then they'd start reading out these names of these people. Here's the contracts, um, and they work out who's going to do each of these different kills. And the thing that precludes somebody from doing it, if they know someone, if they know that person, they're not allowed to kill them. It has to be somebody that you deny, presumably because this might impact on, you might not go through with it or something, uh, because you care about that person. But the clear implication of that is that these people aren't no one, in that they've not given up their identities. They still are them. If they were truly no one with no connections to anywhere, that conversation wouldn't happen because nobody would be, none of those people would stick up their hand and say, "Well, I know this person," because it wouldn't matter. So part of the answer is the training is not what Arya thinks it is. The training actually is not to get her to a position where she loses herself and then becomes this kind of empty vessel. There's an acceptance that that's not where trainees are going to end up. And then secondly, the suggestion has to be that they know who she wants to kill and they're okay with that. So they just have to point her in the right direction and let her go. What do I mean by that? Is Jaqen heard her recite her list. They've heard her recite the list in the House of Black and White. They know who she wants to kill. This isn't a surprise. They know that she's not given up on that. Some of those names on the list, they are probably also interested in having killed, particularly the Mountain. The Mountain now, to them, will be a heresy. All men must die, unless you're the Mountain, who was prevented from dying, brought back from death in a way that we do not yet fully understand by Qyburn. Who is bankrolling this? Cersei. So these are people that they, as a religion, probably will very happily see dead. And if they train Arya up so that she becomes an expert assassin and then let her leave, she will, of her own volition, go and kill those people. So that does seem to be part of where they're going with this. And there's also something that I'd just like to draw your attention to. that something is definitely off with, and you can draw your own conclusions about what that might be. The Faceless Men have Arya there, who ostensibly they're trying to teach her not to be Starkish, to lose that, to forget about her kill list, to move on. They've seen how when she's faced with something that she feels she ought to intervene, she will do a kill of her own volition. What's their response to that? Well, it's to put her into a troupe of mummers who are performing a play about her time in King's Landing, featuring a character who is very probably Sansa, as far as we can tell, plus Joffrey and the King and Tyrion and these people that she actually knows about. So this is about her recent past, reminding her about her Stark ways. Um, their way of helping Arya not be tempted to go back to her Starkishness and murder people on her list is to be on that, is to be a part of a group of actors performing her past at a performance at which a member of her list is watching. That, whatever you might think, that is not just an oversight by the Faceless Men. This is deliberate in some way. They must have been aware of that, and they must have known what Arya was going to do. They've prompted her memory by making sure that she's acting out the terrible things that happened to her family, and then they're allowing her to see somebody that's on her kill list. It's only going to end one way. So my working assumption is that the Faceless Men are not there trying to train out her Starkishness out of her. They're telling her they are, but that's not actually what they're doing. They understand that that's never going to go. They are training her to be a killer, but they want to train her up and then point her in the right direction and just let her do it. That, I think, is what's going on. Right, let's have a look in the chat. Super sticker from Cheryl Baxter. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate that. Nick Drum, thank you very much for saying that it was a good answer. I appreciated that. Carl Karsnock saying the play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. Yeah, exactly. So this is the idea. This is Hamlet. For those who don't know, Hamlet stages a play with these traveling actors that he's putting in front of his uncle, who he thinks has killed his father, thinking that this is going to sort of prompt his uncle to give himself away. It's a bit like that. Right, let's have a quick flick through the chat. Carl Karsnock also saying very Shakespearean of George R. R. Martin to have a play within a play about the events of the play. Yes, very much so. April May saying what Jaqen is doing at the Citadel, is he gone rogue? I don't believe so. I think that this is he's not on a contract to kill something. I think he's there on behalf of the Faceless Men, who are, we have to keep on reminding ourselves, not just a really cool bunch of assassins. This is a religion. This is a religion with a very clear set of beliefs that are being challenged across the entire world at that moment in time. They believe that everyone must die. And yet they look around the world and they see zombies north of the wall. They see zombies in King's Landing. They see people being brought back to life in the Riverlands. There's the House of the Undying going on. There's all around them. Death no longer is coming for all men. So they will be very keen to be doing something about that. Reflective Rambling, pick up a question for Justinerino. Why would Illyrio give Dany the dragon eggs if he is championing young Griff? Wouldn't they be better used making Fagon look real? Yes, but he may have more dragon eggs. Who knows? The the first point is that he didn't think, nobody thought in a million years that these eggs were going to hatch. They were purely symbolic. There was no idea that dragons were going to happen. So that said, why did he give them to Dany? Well, I mean, I think we have to be honest and say it's entirely possible that George R. R. Martin might not, at that point of writing the story, have fully thought out the idea of this character of Fagon, young Griff. So he might not have engaged his brain about that type of thinking at the time. But more broadly speaking, if we do try and sort of think through this, the first plan was definitely for Dany to be involved in this. They were going to try and get the Viserys to attack with the Dothraki, so Dany would be coming across. If they couldn't at this point, young Griff was still too young at that point. He was probably 11, 12, too young to be at the head of an army. So they were almost certainly planning on introducing him slightly later on. Probably with a view to still marrying Daenerys. They knew what Viserys was like. They didn't want Viserys to be running the Seven Kingdoms. I think the idea was that he would come across with the Dothraki, win, but then he would die. And who would take over after him? Oh, well, we've got another Targaryen here who's magically appeared. Here's young Griff, and he can marry Dany because, let's say, Khal Drogo has also died. So that, I think, was the plan. Yes, you're right. But the bigger prize in terms of something that makes you look like a proper Targaryen would be the sword Blackfire, the sword of King Aegon the Conqueror. And that was being held back for young Griff. Cheryl Baxter, how do you think the Faceless Men will react to Daenerys as she's freeing slaves, not like her ancestors? Yeah, I mean, so in Braavos, the first law of Braavos is no one shall be a slave. So the Braavosi are very much in favour of that. The Faceless Men, though, doesn't seem to be part of their core set of beliefs. There's even when the kindly man is talking to Arya and he's explaining the founding of the Faceless Men, and he talks about the slaves there under old Valyria, terrible working conditions, and one of the slaves was crying out for death, basically, and the first Faceless Man gave him that gift. And Arya kind of calls out and says, "No, that's not right. You should be killing the masters, not the slaves." And the kindly man sort of explains, "Yeah, that's in the future. They will be killed, but no, all men must die." And this was somebody who wanted. He was offering himself up for this. So it's not about who deserves it. And that, incidentally, with Arya is another one of the things that grates with the Faceless Men. What they're teaching her is that she's always there saying the people who die should deserve it, and they're saying it's not about who deserves it. Everyone must die. So it yes, they might on one kind of moral level think Dany's good getting rid of slavery, but also that's not the main thing that their religion is about. Like me. Okay, let's have a quick flick through. Andrew K saying Viserys could have been the initial claimant. They could easily topple. Yep, I think that was plan one. They got onto it now, or at least plan five now, those two. Think with that, I will start to draw this to a close. If you like the idea of In Deep Sleep, I will put a link to that somewhere in the middle here. That's where the audio from all of these live streams, I'm just cutting that and putting that over some kind of soothing image, a little bit of sort of crackling fire, that kind of thing. The idea is that when I stop talking, then the noise and the nice image will just stay there, and you can just drift off to sleep. You may well have drifted off to sleep before this point, but that could just sort of carry on through the night for you. So that's the idea. If you're interested in that, do go and check out In Deep Sleep. On this channel that I'm streaming on at the moment, IDG Live, you probably noticed I've started doing the shorts, which I've been threatening for a while. So short form videos, do go and check them out if you like. And they're also going up onto TikTok. If you're a TikTok person, do go and check that out. I'm over there as well. So if you are watching this back a little bit later, you want to watch a few more of the live streams, there is a link appearing somewhere around here. If you would like to support this channel, thank you. The best way to do that is through Patreon. The link is appearing somewhere around here. Moderators, thank you. Please show a little bit of love to the moderators on your way out, everybody. Patrons, thank you. I cannot do this without your support, and I hugely appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for getting involved today. Take care, and I will see you same time next week. Bye.